You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Commonwealth Classics is the sponsor of this month's Centresteer podcast. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique Land Rovers. Their showroom is located in Virginia, just 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their inventory of classic vehicles. And thanks to Commonwealth Classics for their continued sponsorship. The Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the Centresteer Podcast, podcast number 90 for September 2020. Wait a minute, we're 10 away from 100. Okay, I just sunk in. This is the first Land Rover podcast on the planet, and is it time to go back to the only Land Rover podcast on the planet?
Well, are we currently the only one?
I believe so.
So we are currently the only podcast.
Centresteer is a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. I'm your host, John Costage. Joining me over Zoom, Harold, Morgan, Dixon, and Brian. Welcome, gentlemen.
Howdy.
So if this is episode 90, is it going to be a short one? And it should have a good ride, too.
Our guest this month is a motor journalist, Giles Chapman. Giles is the author of a new book out this month called Land Rover, Gripping Photos of the 4x4 Pioneer. Later in the podcast, he'll tell us how the book came to be, and his connection to Land Rover. Turns out he's just like us from some of the stories.
Although he's a bit more of a book nerd than any of us, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But doesn't he own a Range Rover he's never driven? Also joining us is David Short to give us another Oxford in America update. And we already recorded it, but he did it from the front seat of Oxford, and that'll be coming up after the news. As always, thanks for your comments, likes, follows on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and email. The podcast is now available on YouTube under the account Centresteer Podcast. It's another way to listen to the show, and no matter what your primary way of listening to the podcast, there's no harm in subscribing to all of them. Feel free. It helps to raise the show up higher in case someone's looking for a Land Rover podcast. Friend of the podcast, Charles Bell, writes to us, "Hello, John. I just wanted to let you know that I will be traveling to Asheville, North Carolina to see Oxford at the Biltmore. I am really excited about it. I really wanted to thank you for the great podcast that you guys put on each month. I've gone back and listened to the 60th, podcast number 60, for probably the fourth time, and since the 65th episode again, just so I can be reminded of some of the details. This is going to be amazing. I get to see the icon in person. Thanks again for the podcast."
You only listen 4 times? Come on, get with it.
Should be on continuous play, right? Just loop it. Thanks, Charles, for listening. The podcast, as you probably all know, is a passion project for us, and we appreciate hearing your kind words. Appreciate it. If you have been following Oxford in America, enjoying our interviews with figures in the Overland and Land Rover community, liking our coverage of most things Land Rover, please consider supporting the show. You can be a regular podcast supporter through Patreon, be a one-time supporter through Buy Me a Tea, or show off your support by purchasing a t-shirt or sticker. Visit centresteer.com for all the details, and that's center spelled in the British way, C-E-N-T-R-E, for those of you driving down the highway at either 10 miles an hour or maybe 100 miles an hour. We have added a voicemail feature to the website. You can record your comment, question, enter your name and email, and it'll get sent over to us. Most likely we'll include the audio on the podcast. There's a big red button called Send Voicemail on the website. I actually had another club had reached out to them to come on the podcast, and they used it to contact it, which was pretty cool. So actually, is that a proper voicemail? Should I send them a t-shirt?
They clicked the button and said something, so I guess it is.
All right, we'll consider that to be a legit voicemail. Eddie, I'll send you a shirt, and he's from the San Diego Club, so San Diego Club should be on the show in a future episode. And before we get to the news, we're going to be talking with Rover Kids again. Rover Kids will be back in December. So if your kid is interested in talking with us, get in touch and we'll sort it out. We're going to bring back Rover Kids. Jaguar Land Rover global retail sales dropped 15.5% in August. They reported a year-on-year decline to 28,887 units in its global retail volume for August in a regulatory filing that it had put out. It sold 8,187 units in China. That's down 7% year-on-year. Over 8,000 units in North America. That's down 17% year-on-year. and 5,186 units in Europe. That's a 25% drop. Although in the UK itself, it was up 14%. In August, they sold 3,098 units in the UK. August retail are also subsequently lower than June and July global sales. So it looks like even though things have kind of recovered a little bit, looks like June and July were trending down, and August even trended down further. On August 25th, Tata Motors annual general meeting, the senior management had said that 98% of all JLR retailers globally are operational. The luxury car maker is betting heavily on its newly launched Defender, which now has an order bank of more than 30,000 units. JLR's manufacturing unit in Slovakia has seen production ramp up to 2 shifts to meet the demand as Europe and other key markets recover. So I guess we're in slow recovery mode. Is that it?
Do they say anywhere whether these statistics, 14% and so on, are just last month, or are they over the same period last year? Because COVID must be making statistical reporting just a fascinating thing to figure out what their baselines are.
I think it's year on year. So that means it's the month, it's the month sales of this year compared to the month sales of last year, same month.
Yeah.
So basically you could attribute most of the drop to COVID, I would think.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, and definitely they're recovering as we see those decreases reduce. So that's good.
Slovakia, they closed the plant for a while, couldn't produce anything for Defender. So even if you wanted one, you weren't going to get one, and hence the delay in getting the D90 out.
Hence the big backlog of 110 sales.
And next, JLR seeks to up recycle content aluminum use. JLR is conducting research in the UK on how to best use aluminum scrap culled from household appliances and end-of-life vehicles for use in future JLR models, thus reducing the company's CO2 emissions output by up to 26%. The firm says its engineers have been able to use aluminum scrap and mix it with a lower amount of primary aluminum to form a new and tested prototype alloy comparable to the existing JLR grade and quality.
That's a big one because I know aluminum to extract the ore or the aluminum from bauxite ore takes like 20 times as much energy versus recycling. So it's a huge energy savings versus mining it new.
But what's the reasoning to not use recycled? Is there some sort of change in the metal?
It's probably the alloy, getting the right alloy for automotive use. Yeah.
It's the chemistry. It's getting rid of the stuff you don't want, because the aluminum you're taking in isn't necessarily the same aluminum that you're getting virgin. So you've got other alloying elements that you've got to try and get out of there, or you've got a lower grade product that you've got to figure out a way to make it as strong as you need it.
Yeah. So for body panels and things, it may not be as important, but for structural aluminum, I imagine that alloy is super critical. It's not soda cans. So
I remember in college doing casting out of beer cans and old Briggs and Strattons. We called it junk alloy.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a major, it takes a lot of electricity, right, Harold, to extract the aluminum from bauxite ore.
A lot of electricity or a lot of flame or however you're doing it.
Right.
And there's the big environmental impact, of course, of digging it up in the first place.
Right.
That's why a lot of the bauxite comes from other places, then ends up in Western United States or in Canada or Norway, where you've got huge hydro dams to do the arc furnaces to make the aluminum.
Right.
Right. And the arc furnace doesn't do the environment any favors either.
No.
And you also have other manufacturers like Ford moving to aluminum use in their vehicles. So there's probably been an increase in demand for aluminum. So finding other sources.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Is a good thing.
Well, and we have a finite amount of bauxite left on the planet too.
Yeah. One of the interesting things they mention in the article is that Land Rover is hoping to get to the point where they'll be decommissioning whole fleets of vehicles for recycling at the same time. So that's an interesting bet to be making.
Well, that actually allows you to control the quality of the product more, because you're getting all of the same metal from the same place. It's not mixing in old toasters and beer cans and then wondering what you're going to end up with.
Yeah.
And that actually would be good for those of us who have older cars and you don't want to let them, for whatever reason, it's not amazing. It doesn't make any sense to put money into the vehicle to keep it going. So you let it sit and fall apart and decompose, if you could turn it back into Land Rover,
Another Land Rover,
and become another Land Rover. Yeah, even if you get a little bit of a credit, or maybe even no credit, you just at least would feel better about, instead of it sitting and rusting in your barn for 30 years.
Well, and I think that also, with the trend towards leasing, I think it allows the corporation an opportunity to do something with the turn-ins as opposed to remarketing them.
That's a good point.
Good discussion there on aluminum. Look at that. Who knew?
We could have the same discussion about steel as well. It's just not as sexy.
All right. We went from like serious, legit, life-changing stuff. We're going to go to this story, and I'm only reading the headline because it tells you everything you need to know. And this is from something called thenextweb.com. Land Rover launched a phone because, and the author says, actually, I've got no idea why.
That is exactly how harsh the article is.
Yes.
Yeah, there's really no good reason.
If you've been paying attention to the podcast, this is actually the second Land Rover branded phone. This is like the Series 2 of Land Rover branded phones.
Yeah, I wonder if they work any better than the nav system in the new 110. The nav system, the new 110, is unaware that the truck has left Slovakia. So if you're in Slovakia, the nav system works reasonably well. But if you're in North America, not so much. And apparently there's no dealer fix for it yet.
Well, that's why they have over-the-air updates. That should get taken care of pretty quick, I hope.
Apparently on Bob's truck, it has not.
So what happened?
Navigating, because the maps are fine.
Well, I don't know what, but for some reason, the truck seems to think it's still in Slovakia. And apparently that's a common problem.
So what's built in Slovakia stays in Slovakia.
There you go.
It's interesting because the one that I drove around here in Ottawa, it had the mapping of all the roads and so on quite well done. No,
you had one of the few that was working.
Maybe it likes Canada too, just not the States.
There you go. It's a protest against the U.S. That's what it is.
Well, you have been rather unfriendly towards the Europeans. You've got a northern wall right now, so I can't even come south to see my Land Rover. So maybe it's fitting.
Moving on in the news, California to ban sale of new gas-powered cars in 2035. The governor signed an executive order that will mandate that all new passenger vehicles sold in California in 15 years be zero emission, a category that includes battery-powered electric cars and those that run on hydrogen fuel cells. The order directs the California Air Resources Board to develop a plan to ensuring an increasing number of new vehicles sold in the state leading up to 2035, the emissions will be zero. Older gasoline-powered cars will still be allowed on the road after 2035, and people could still sell them
for now
on the used car market. I looked at the order, and I should have saved it. Unfortunately, I didn't. I was looking at the order, but and also in the articles that I saw, there was no mention of diesel gas-powered vehicles, and they kept saying gasoline-powered, but maybe. I assume diesel's still relatively used in California, right?
Yeah, but it's not as common as you might think. It's harder to get a diesel-powered automobile in California, but I think that maybe the order just was written by somebody who doesn't get diesel, so they just used the word gasoline to refer to all fossil fuels.
I mean, everywhere else it's internal combustion engine, which you think would have been a better use.
It would have been a better way to word it, yes.
Yeah, and the diesel is certainly not zero emissions, so.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
So what happens with the other 21 or 22 states that follow California? Are they effectively banning it in 35 also?
Yeah, that remains to be seen.
It's a matter of time. Maybe next month, that'll be what we talk about. But now California, I think, is the 10th nation to outlaw internal combustion.
Looking at the list that I've been keeping, and I'm declaring that an official list. So here we are. I'll read you California by 2035, Seoul by 2035, Ireland 2030, Amsterdam 2030, Hamburg is Germany. There's no date, but I think they're banning older diesels. China looking at plans. I don't think we ever saw any concrete evidence on China, what they're doing. Norway goal by 2025. German government votes to ban internal combustion engines by 2030. So maybe that takes care of Hamburg there. India going electric only. Goal of no gas, diesel by 2030. France to ban sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2040. Britain to ban new diesel and gas cars by 2040. Scotland to ban by 2032. There's your list.
Yeah, I think that's 10, maybe 11.
And if cities, states, and countries, kind of lump them all together, I guess.
Well, California is a bigger country than a lot of countries that have.
Well, it's like
that have
number
banned.
5 economically, I think, if you were
Right, something
pull it
like
out.
that. So it's economic power wise, it's a country of its own. And face it, the rest of this country will eventually follow California's lead.
And just for the record, while you guys were discussing, I was looking. They announced in June that they were going to be banning the sale of diesel trucks, heavy duty trucks, by 2045. So I wasn't finding anything on diesel cars at the moment, but diesel trucks are on the way out by 2045 as well.
Send that article over, so add it to the list.
I will do that. Yeah,
and you can't register a diesel Defender there right now.
You can't get a diesel Defender.
Well, you can get one if you have one in another state that's been imported here. You can't take it into California and register it.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay, so
it's a real pain in the ass.
Oh, okay. So maybe there's an existing anti-diesel control already in place, maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's a lot of anti-everything in place already.
Yeah, the requirements have been always much more stringent.
And they've gotten worse over time.
Well, I, for one, like clean air, clean water, clean food. Moving on, 5 of the 10 slowest selling used vehicles in the U.S. are Land Rovers. If you happen to own a Land Rover in the United States and are planning to sell it one day, we have bad news for you from Car Scoops. It may take you quite a while to find a buyer. While analyzing the used car market across the country in March through June 2020 this year, a study has found that of the 10 slowest selling used vehicles, no less than 5 of them are Land Rovers. The slowest selling used vehicles in the nation, the slowest selling used vehicle in the nation is the Land Rover Discovery, the D5.
You clarify here that when they say slowest selling, it's the ability to sell the vehicle, not the velocity of the vehicle.
There's a hyphen between slowest and selling. So yes, that's my understanding. The Disco takes an average of 199.9 days to sell, significantly longer than the average of 68.9 days across all used vehicles. And then number 2, Land Rover, Range Rover Velar, 188 days. Then the Maserati Levante, 181 days. The Range Rover Sport, 125 days. A Kia Cadenza, the Disco Sport, 118 days. The full-size Range Rover, 117 days. A Cadillac XT4, the Alfa Romeo Stelvio, and the Ford EcoSport, rounding out at 109 days.
Well, that list is heavily populated with expensive vehicles, which might explain some of that.
and those are all on the used market, right? That's not new inventory. That's all used inventory.
Correct. That is used inventory. So if you're in the market for a Land Rover, especially a D5 or Velar, it is a buyer's market, apparently.
Unless they're not budging on prices, and that's one of the reasons.
Not clear that it's individuals or if it would be, let's say, used car lots or new car dealers. I assume it's...
Must be fairly recent vehicles, though. So some of them are low volume cars. But ads I see for series vehicles, they sell fairly fast.
It's
At
the
least
only
they're
thing
certainly...
a series truck.
Yeah, true.
Looking at the average price of the vehicles on the list, yes, the Disco, the Velar, you're talking north of $40,000. The 2 on the low end is the Ford EcoSport, $17,000, and the Kia Cadenza is $20,000. Yeah.
And if they're not very old, then the customer probably is still maybe upside down on the loan, so they can't budge much on the price, which makes it harder to sell.
And moving on, the Range Rover Velar updated for 2021 with mild and plug-in hybrid tech. Land Rover has updated the Velar for 2021 with a new mild hybrid engines and a fresh plug-in hybrid model. The luxury SUV will also benefit from the addition of Land Rover's latest PHEV. Are we saying PHEV? I don't know. Entertainment system, as well as a new noise cancellation system designed to improve refinement. Details in a moment. Other tech updates are less obvious, including noise cancellation system that monitors vibrations from the road surface, then works out the opposite phase sound wave needed to remove the noise. The effect is, by Land Rover's own admission, subtle, but it cuts interior noise volume by 4 decibels.
Yeah, it's something.
It's something. The Ford F-150 pipes in engine noise so you can, because it's so quiet, so you can at least know that there's some engine noise going
Well,
on.
I read somewhere that the human ear is capable of detecting a change in sound pressure level of 2 decibels. So the 4 should be noticeable.
Is it modular so we can try and retrofit it into our series view?
Yeah, sure.
The true test will be whether it can cancel out mud terrain tires on the highway.
What about studded tires?
Or the dashboard shake when you have a diesel.
Yeah.
But the most important new addition is the P400e plug-in hybrid, which teams a 2-liter petrol engine with an electric motor. The 17.1 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery enables a 33-mile electric range, while the 398 brake horsepower combination of petrol and electric power allows the car to hit 60 miles an hour after 5.1 seconds.
Right on. That's about right.
There you go. Yeah. I still laugh, Land Rover's going sub double digits in 0 to 60.
Well, they will if you throw them off a cliff. They all will.
They all will.
Not with those aerodynamics. They don't get that moving down that fast.
They reach terminal velocity. Yeah, right.
There was a Top Gear episode where Hammond did a segment where they drag raced a Porsche against a Beetle, and the Beetle won because it was going vertically.
New Defender news. The new Defender is to be launched in India on October 15th, which had been delayed because of COVID, of course. And it is already available in the UAE. If you want to read a review about the new Defender 110 in the UAE, we'll have a link in the show notes, but it's now available, and they drive it in the sand. And then we have a first drive of the 110 here in the United States from Autoblog. I'll read you the introduction to this. You then, a listener, can go out and read the article if you like. I think it's actually a good read, but here we go. After years of false starts and dashed hopes and further COVID-driven production delays, the first all-new Defender since 1946 is here. That was actually in the article, freaking.
And 1946, too, which is the interesting part.
Including for us long-denied Yanks. And the 2020 Land Rover Defender is nothing short of brilliant, as we discovered over 3 days in upstate New York and the mountains of Vermont. That included a climb up the green shoulders of Vermont's Mount Equinox, the tallest summit in the Taconic Mountains. It's a trip that takes tourists 20 minutes on the 5.2-mile Skyline Drive, the route for America's oldest auto hill climb event. We, on the other hand, would be taking the long way up on Mount Equinox's daunting, steep, bouldered trails. It would take 3 hours, but the new Land Rover ate it all up and had us begging for more. Well, there's one other thing to read. We drove what seemed like an especially representative model, a 2020 Defender 110 SE that starts at $63,600 and reached $72,780. American with options. Those included the $1,750 off-road pack that adds the electronic active diff, a 120-volt outlet, and 19-inch Goodyear Wrangler off-road tires. It's a looker, including a $600 sandy brown paint called Gondwana Stone, paired with a contrasting black roof.
It's a very enthusiastic article for sure.
Yes.
And yes. The photos taken in the on Mount Equinox are quite good.
Have you been on Mount Equinox?
I actually have not. No.
That's not far from
Still
you, right?
Not too far, no.
So which route would you take if you were going there?
Oh, I would definitely take the off-road route.
Over the boulders and such?
Yeah.
In what?
Uh-oh, he's leading you.
That's for sure.
Eventually, you will take your Series 2, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Series 3.
Land Rover Defender gets new plug-in hybrid and diesel variants. So there's like 3 or 4 articles here. I'll read bits of different ones of them because they all give slightly different variations of information, but I thought interesting to read some of them, not all of them. The Land Rover Defender has been updated for the 2021 model year, and in Europe is now offered with an all-new plug-in hybrid powertrain. This new variant is dubbed the Defender P400e and combines a powerful 2-liter 4-cylinder petrol engine with an electric motor to deliver a combined 398 horsepower. Sorry. Just thinking back to series and days of, double-digit horsepower. Now we have triple-digit horsepower. Anyway, this allows the P400e to hit 0 to 60 in a respectable 5.4 seconds, as well as a top speed of 130 miles per hour. The off-roader is also capable of being driven in all-electric mode for 27 miles.
Not at that speed.
Yeah, true. Elsewhere, the Land Rover has ditched the 4-cylinder diesel engine in favor of a new Ingenium 6-cylinder diesel that is sold in D300 guise with 296 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of torque. This model can hit 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds in Defender 90 form and works alongside mild hybrid electric technology. In Europe, the Defender is also available in D200, D250 models, while in the United States, it is offered with a turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol P300 engine and an efficient 6-cylinder petrol mild hybrid. What you're reading there is that the diesel variant is not available in the U.S.
What you're reading there is nothing cool is ever available in the U.S.
The Autoblog article, in 2021, Land Rover, while the only second model year, the off-road oriented SUV marks a number of important developments, the most significant of which won't be offered in the U.S., at least for the time being, a plug-in hybrid and a new diesel inline 6. But the U.S. is finally getting the two-door D90. And the other big powertrain update is this. So this is U.S. specific stuff. The other big powertrain update is the addition of 6-cylinder diesel engines. The base 200 makes 197 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. The D250 makes 247 horsepower, 420 pound-feet of torque. The top-end D300, 296 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of torque. Land Rover says this version will hit 60 miles per hour in 6.3 seconds. Unfortunately, none of these powertrains will be offered in the U.S., at least for now. Land Rover representatives confirmed this, but wouldn't comment on whether that's just the case for this model year, or if the Defender will stick with the conventional gasoline engines for the next few years. We'd be a bit surprised the PHEV isn't being offered, considering the aforementioned Wrangler 4xe is going to be on sale next year, and the fact that the same powertrain is available in the Range Rover PHEV.
I think one of the challenges they have here in the American market is, with so many engine variations is confusion at the dealership level, because we're a unique market in that we like to come in, shop, and walk out with our car the same day. And, Europeans and other markets will definitely spec out a car exactly the way they need it for their efficiency reasons or tax reasons, all these other things that really don't affect us. And dealers don't want 8 engine variants on the lot, when they're just trying to move metal along. I think the dealers probably drive that to some extent, as much as certifying each of these drivetrains for EPA certification.
Well, yeah, the certification is an expensive process.
Yeah.
You have to certify each engine and vehicle combination. You can't just certify the vehicle and you can't just certify the engine.
Exactly. Yep. And then to have dealers that can't explain the differences between all the variations, maybe, or try to stock and order what exactly people want.
Dealers can't explain anything really all that well as far as the vehicle. If they can't read it out of the brochure, they don't know what it is.
Yeah, there's no brochures anymore, are there?
Exactly. So they know even less than they used to, which was never enough.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the U.S. buys cars differently than I guess the rest of the world. That makes sense.
Entirely. Yeah, that's a discussion for another time. Yeah, in Europe, it's not uncommon to walk into your dealer, specify it on paper, build it the way you want it. 6-8 weeks later, you come pick it up, take delivery. We're much more about immediate gratification. The dealers want to. We inventory way more cars, and you can walk into a dealership in Europe and you'll have 3 or 4 demonstrators, and that's about it. They don't inventory cars because they have a short supply chain for stuff that's built locally, and they don't try to anticipate the needs of the customers. They build to order. So that's another reason we get white, silver, and black cars here. No dealer wants to get adventurous with color combinations and option packages that might sit for 6-8 months or whatever, and have to wait for a rebate of some sort. It's an entirely different way. We're unique in that most other countries order to spec and take delivery later.
And it's so ingrained that if you do go into a dealer and try to order to spec, that you're unlikely to make any headway there.
Yeah. They will work hard to make sure you leave with something today if possible.
Well, I know what they're going to do is they're going to try to sell you what they do have.
Right.
And if you don't like it, you want something particular, they're going to find another dealer nearby that they can trade for what they have to get you what you want.
Yep. Market's entirely different.
Yep.
Not to derail the news. That's
not at all. No, that's actually really cool, good information to consider for when you're looking at sales here in the U.S. That's and I'm sure people around the world don't realize that's how things are done here either too, and maybe wondering why the U.S.
It certainly explains the lack of diversity in offerings on the dealer lot. You can go to 3 or 4 different Land Rover dealers if you're lucky enough to live in an area where there's that many, within a short proximity. And
for instance,
and you're going to find a lot of the same inventory because they're taking low risk inventory decisions. And it's you want you want metallic green with with caramel colored interior. They're not going to have that on the lot. No one gets that brave. There's a handful of dealers historically in each mark that that kind of own that specialty market, but they're known for that. And you see it. You don't see it in the Land Rover community for the most part. Most of the Land Rover dealers take the safe bet. And
in the good old days, you just bought what they had, and then you took it down the street to the shop and had it repainted to the color you want.
Exactly. But those days are long gone.
Well, it's way too expensive to do that now.
Yeah.
Some specifics about the new D90. 2021 Land Rover Defender adds 2-door D90 model and X dynamic trim. This is from Motor Trend. In its inaugural year, the resurrected Land Rover Defender impresses us with its stellar combination of off-road performance and modern creature comforts. For 2021, the rock-crawling beast is back with a new X dynamic variant. And finally, the short wheelbase D90 model is available for orders in multiple configurations. The 2021 Land Rover Defender X Dynamic slots between the standard model and the brawny Defender X. It features gloss black door trim, gloss black cladding, and silicon satin skid plate pans. Open the doors and you'll find Robust Tech, a durable material that protects the cabin from wear and tear. Previously delayed, the stubby D90 makes an entrance starting at $47,450. This 2-door SUV seats up to 5 or 6 people, depending on configuration. It can be had with either of Land Rover's 2-liter Turbo 4, making 296 horsepower, or the mild hybrid 3-liter Turbo V6. Of course, buyers can still opt for the 4-door Defender 110 with prices starting from $51,000.
We have 0 to 60 times on the 90 yet, since that seems to be the theme of the show.
Sir, I don't think so. No, they do not. They do not list.
They don't go fast.
They don't go fast. No, it should go faster, right? Because it's less.
Well, that's why I'm asking. It weighs less, and it ought to be. I wonder if we've got one yet that can crack the 5-second mark.
I'm looking right now. I don't see it. Yeah. I think the interesting thing there is when they first announced the 90 and the 110 variants year ago. It was September last year they announced it. They were only talking about the 90 with the 3-liter engine, and they hadn't committed to a 4-cylinder 90 last year. The 110 they showed was available, as the 2-liter turbocharged or the 3-liter turbocharged. And the 90 was, I think they announced it was starting at a higher base price with the 3-liter engine only. They didn't mention a 2-liter coming to the States. Obviously, other markets were different. So they must be seeing a lot of interest maybe in the 2-liter engine to have brought that in at the Defender 90 level.
Looking at the Land Rover North America press release, to your point about the specific 90 models, there's going to be the D90, $46,000, has a 2-liter turbocharged. There's the D90S 2-liter turbocharged, $49,000.
Right.
The 90 X Dynamic S mild hybrid 6, $57,000. The D90 First Edition mild hybrid 3-liter 6, $64,000, and then the top of the line D90X mild hybrid 6 for $80,000.
And I think it was September 9th last year was the big official release. So a little over a year ago, and as I recall, it was 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder 110 and 6-cylinder 90 was what they had announced at the time. But some things have changed. Maybe the plan was always to bring the 4-cylinder 90 in later, and because of the COVID delay, maybe they only intended to launch that as a 6-cylinder initially and then bring in the 4 later. But
I could see them wanting to start with the more expensive engine to try and drive their profit margin to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, while you were talking, I skimmed the rest of the press release. I didn't see anything about 0 to 60 time.
I didn't either.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They seem to be all over it for the 110 and talking about all the different numbers, but
I'm wondering, Harold, if it's because it hasn't been shown to any American journalist or been brought to America for any sort of testing or.
Well, that could be.
Yeah, it was September 10th last year, digging through the history here. But yeah, in any event, there'll be a 4-cylinder 90 here.
Which is pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
It makes more sense than a 4-cylinder 110.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It seemed reversed. It should have been maybe the other way around, but.
And the 110, based on the press release, the 110 still has, you can get the 110, the 110S, or the 2 base level models there, 4-cylinder 2-liter turbocharged, 50,000, 53,000.
Yep.
Then you go up to the 6, and you can get yourself a 110X. Top of the line, $83,000. Oh, you know what? That X Dynamic, the reason they added that in is because they got rid of the first edition. They didn't need it anymore. And that would make sense. So the X Dynamic probably replaces the first edition.
Yeah.
Well, that is Land Rover new-ish Land Rover news. And we'll move into some Land Rover and other news and older Land Rovers. Jeep has announced an Adventure Academy to teach owners how to drive off-road.
Great idea.
So Jeep's answer to the Land Rover experience, I guess. Huh?
That's my thinking here from Autoblog. Jeep has created a driving school called Adventure Academy to show owners how to explore the great outdoors without getting stuck in a rut. It is open to all motorists who own one of the brand's 4-wheel drive models, whether it's a CJ5 or Gladiator. Courses are tailored to suit all skill levels. So
apparently if you own a postal Jeep, you're not eligible.
Held at off-road parks in 3 states, the driving school will teach owners the basics. They'll learn how the 4-wheel drive system works, how to prepare their vehicle for a trip in the wilderness, how to properly read terrain, plus difficult driving techniques, trail etiquette, and safety tips. Instructors from Jeep Jamboree, a company that has organized off-road trips since 1953, will teach the course. Jeep said it will keep classes small to ensure participants have time to learn hands-on and ask questions. Price for a 1-day session starts at $99, but you'll need to bring your own Jeep.
That's cheap.
It is cheap.
I'm sure if you're new and want to figure out how to do things and don't want to hurt your vehicle, $99 is cheap insurance.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's insurance about anything, but at least you'll be with a trained professional when you break your own truck.
It's a lot easier to keep the cost down when you have to BYOJ, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think you're right. I think that is a response to the growing off-roading movement here. At least it seems in the U.S. Whether that was because you have the Bronco coming out, you've got the new Jeeps, you got Land Rover updating the Defender, which we all know.
I wonder if any of Jeep's instructors were trained by Bill Burke.
And 4x4 face-off. Land Rover Defender meets G-Class Jeep rivals. This is from Autocar. I'm just going to read you the introduction. You get to read the article if you wish. There's no tougher pair of 4-wheeled opponents for the all-new Land Rover Defender than the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon and the Mercedes G-Class. As you'll probably have already read, these are rivals that offer both precisely what the new generation of monocoque underbodied Land Rover has just given up in its rush towards well-mannered modernity, a ladder frame chassis, solid articulating axles, and a degree of compactness that has fallen well out of fashion with the makers of today's luxury SUVs. What a difference will that make? I wonder, ? And then you can read the article to find out. Direct you readers to that. Good article. And another comparison. This is, but going back in time, the classic off-road SUV comparison test, Battle of the Jeep Alternatives. This is from Motor Trend, and I'll read you the intro to this. Peel away the decades of evolution that have softened the modern SUV, independent suspension, leather-trimmed heated seats, rear seat entertainment systems, power adjustable pedals, and what do you have left? Heritage from the golden age of off-roading. The term sport utility vehicle didn't exist back then. People were just realizing the vehicles designed for emergency crews and farmers, also made for exciting off-road adventuring. The vehicles became so popular that sales increased by 700% between 1961 and 1971, growing 31% every year in that period. SUVs soon replaced muscle cars as the hot niche.
Those were not SUVs, mind you. Those were just utility vehicles. So they were utility vehicles because they were designed to do important things. things.
I was recently watching a documentary on the Bronco, and I think the original Bronco was the first to coin the term sport utility vehicle. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was a specific variant, one of the three variants of the original Bronco that was considered the sport utility vehicle. But don't quote me on that.
That's good enough information for me. This article compares the Bronco, the Series 2A, the Toyota Land Cruiser FJ40, and the International Harvester Scout.
That's an interesting side-by-side.
John Mayer can sell you the 2020 Land Rover Defender by simply going outside. They made a 5-minute video of John Mayer, the singer, with the new Land Rover Defender in the Redwood Mountains, the Redwood Forest of California. You can watch it. It's as you might expect. But my favorite part is the 30-second video that's like a secondary little extra clip where he talks about he doesn't like a clean car. He thinks they look best when they're dirty. Hats off to John Mayer. I completely agree.
Well, series trucks look best when dirty and bashed.
He does say that he wants to have the truck come back destroyed at the end of the day.
He did. Yes.
That can be arranged. Give me a call, John.
Well, Land Rover gave him a new Defender. I'd like to bring it back dirty and destroyed.
It's funny because the Arliss Blue 90 that he had at the reveal in Los Angeles was neither bashed nor dirty.
So he'd just gotten it.
No, he's had that one a while, as I understand. I just don't think he lives up to his own ethos.
Okay.
Not with that one anyway.
So he's all hat and no cattle, as they would say in Texas.
Maybe because it's his versus it was Land Rover's that he had on loan. Because in the video you show him, he actually goes into a little mud rut and gets it all dirty.
I sent a press car back once, muddy and a little bashed, and it didn't go over well. So,
well, you're not John Mayer either.
I was just going to say I'm not John Mayer.
And finally, the very first production Land Rover spent decades hiding on a farm. And this article is from Auto Week. The very first vehicles off the production line tend to receive one of two fates. They're either immediately placed in an automaker's museum, still covered in champagne and balloons from the assembly line launch party, or they're simply sent out to be sold and often get lost to time. The very first Land Rover to roll out of Solihull received the later fame, or so it seemed. After surviving several decades in a British countryside, it was rescued just a few years ago and given a sympathetic restoration. And now the Series 1 4x4, known in Land Rover community by its original license plate, JUE 477, is getting its own book. The 128-page book from Porter Press, written by Martin Short, written by Martin Port, will tell the full story of the Land Rover and will contain 240 photos within detailing its life, rediscovery, and careful restoration.
We need to get Martin Short on the show doing an impression of Martin Port. Now, that would be good.
He can nail it. No one knows what Martin Port sounds like. So whatever he does will be acceptable. We won't know better.
Although Martin has been on the show, he is a friend of the show, and I did reach out to him to come on the show in the future episode to talk about the book.
Perfect.
And of course, we have another author on this month talking about another book, the photo book on the Land Rover, the 4x4 iconic photos, as John furiously looks for his notes.
The gripping photos.
Exactly. Thank you, Harold. The gripping photos of the 4x4 Pioneer. So that's coming up after we talk to David Short. And now joining us from inside of Oxford is once again David Short. Welcome, sir.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Excellent. So you are sitting inside Oxford. We can see you. The hatch is partially open. What's happening? Where are you?
So I'm sitting here with my co-pilot, Mike McKay, and we are in a parking lot of a shopping mall area on the side of the road just north of Dalton, Georgia.
And you're wearing your Maine Winter Romp t-shirt.
Indeed, I'm representing the Winter Romp as best I can. We're en route today to Tellico Plains. That's our destination for today. We're about 70 miles away. So we'll make another late arrival, and that's just what we do here. But we are, so far, touch wood, we've made every destination on time, on schedule, mostly on time.
And under your own power?
Oh, yeah. We haven't been towed forward anywhere.
Towed reversed?
You want to know about that?
If you wish to share, sure.
So I think
details. We need details.
Yeah, this is a tidbit that I've left off the the Facebook. This is just an exclusive for the Centresteer podcast listeners. We did have a small bit of trouble with Oxford over in Moab. That's the only place where we had a little any trouble that impeded forward momentum. And the story really, this is the big story I'll leave with you guys today is as Mike and I we left Oregon by ourselves, one truck, two guys, one mission, and just largely took off following our nose down the highway, trying to find our way over to where we got to be. We spent large amounts of time without internet service and in desolate areas. And probably the most remote was we took off from, what was the park in Nevada again called? Red Rocks, right?
Right. No, Valley of Fire.
Valley of Fire. We left Valley of Fire State Park in Nevada, and we took off toward Arizona to the northern edge of the Grand Canyon. Once we got around Lake Mead, we spent 90 miles through the desert, no cell service, by ourselves, one truck, two guys in the desert, and that's it for 90 miles. At the end of our 90-mile trek, and this was off-road 90 miles. We were in low range, struggling over rocks and climbing up over hills and stuff. When we got to the edge of the Grand Canyon, there was this little girl there and a National Forest Service volunteer. She was the volunteer watching the National Forest Service campground, where the campground was like 8 picnic tables scattered around the desert. We had reserved one of those, and she's checked our name off the list, and that's where we camped that night. There were a family of 4 that had hiked in from a vehicle parked outside the area, and then another group around the corner, and that was it. So we're out here really by ourselves, hanging out there a mile, and really enjoying ourselves, no problem. We get to Moab, and we get back into civilization, and we catch up with a great group of friends from Virginia. We have a good trips through Moab, seeing some of the trails there, some of the things were posted online. And we're leaving Moab, heading toward Colorado. And as we're leaving Moab, we're on a trail heading off through the mountains of eastern Utah, heading toward western Colorado. And we hear this crunch, pink pop noise in the back. And Mike and I both say, maybe that really didn't, but that noise, maybe we can ignore it. And they came back again. We said, well, maybe, it took us a minute, and we realized,
maybe it'll go away.
yeah. We were hoping, fingers crossed, but it didn't heal itself. And took us, I don't know, about 10 or 15 minutes of diagnosing, going forward, going backwards, turning left, turning right, and realized, yes, the spider gears in the diff have definitely let go. And we lost the rear diff in Oxford on a trail in Moab. But in contrast to where we were in Arizona by ourselves, we had a convoy of about 8 or 10 friends with us. And the day before, a fella had posted up on the Facebook page, hey, I'm a fan of Oxford. I've got a shop in the Moab area. Give me a call if you guys need anything. And we've got cell service. So I call this guy up, and I ask him, and I said, hey, this is our problem. He gives me his address. He's 7 miles from where we're at. So I send 2 of the guys down there. Mike went down with the guys to his shop. They go down to this guy's shop. They root around in the weeds, and they find some serious diffs in the weeds of this guy's shop. True story. They take the diffs inside the shop. It's in the desert, so they're not rusty, but they're all dirty. They power wash them, clean them up, replace some of the seals on them, and those diffs are ready to go. We're trying to find a trailer to pick up Oxford off the side of the trail, and we can't find one unless it's like an hour and a half away. And the guy says, oh, no, don't worry about that. In the back of his shop in the grass, there's a car hauler. Bob Steele picks up the car hauler and his brand new Defender, runs back up the trail 7 miles, picks me up in Oxford, drags me with his new Defender back down to the shop. And long story short, 6 hours later, we've got a new differential installed in Oxford, and we're making forward progress again. And we say that Oxford was never towed on the trip because this 7 miles was actually, we went forward and then we got towed backwards 7 miles on our journey. Then we went and did that 7 miles again. So that tow didn't help us. It actually drug us backwards 7 miles. So we're not going to count the tow as any help whatsoever.
Net zero.
Yeah, exactly. Net zero. But but it was an amazing story. The guy was super nice. It was a weird little place, but we got Oxford running again. I cannot believe we went from, if we had blown that diff 3 days earlier and there was in a desert, Mike and I would be bleach bones in the desert right now. But we blew it in Utah with all of our friends around us, and it was a good story. Everyone pitched in to help out. Mark Garrington, Larry Michelin, all those guys were getting dirty and greasy up to their elbows, making this thing work. And we got Oxford. We actually fixed a few things with Oxford. There were a couple of naggy oil leaks that were in process. So we got those fixed as well. So it was a we made the best of the opportunity. And that's our biggest setback. And there really wasn't much of a setback. We lost 6 hours that day. And then we ended up driving in the dark, which we didn't like to do. But we got back to
Oxford has such nice headlights.
The headlights are okay. They're a lot better since we threw that South African battery away.
I thought you might have to get Mike to go be in front of the vehicle with a flashlight.
No, we got as far as Vegas, and we finally said, this thing, we're tired. There was so many small problems with the truck. I mean, just so many cascading small problems. Each problem on its own was a small problem, but it led to another problem. And when you fix that, you found another problem. They're just small issues. But yeah, we got to Las Vegas and we said, we're tired of this electrical system not working right. We pulled the battery out and they tested it. And they said, this battery is super old and it won't hold any charge. There's no amps in it. Went down to Advanced Auto, bought an Advanced Auto cheapo battery, chucked in there, and Oxford has run like a top since that. Getting a full 12 volts and a starting crankage amperage that you wanted. So that was a big plus up there. Once we figured out that was one of our problems. Another one of the problems with it going into there was we just had every part in the ignition system was replaced between Oregon and Vegas, or Oregon Reno. The coil, we had 2 or 3 used coils. Every time we put a coil in there, they wouldn't work. So we threw all the used coils away. Finally got a new coil. A new condenser, new points, and new plugs, new rotor, new cap, new wires. Because we replaced each of those things incrementally, and it still had a problem. And then after we got all the whole ignition system replaced, then it started running without missing and skipping a beat and all that. That whole I think the skipping and messing around that you guys experienced in Pittsburgh, all that's gone now, and it runs a ton better. Still we're max speed 45 miles an hour, but we're not skipping and farting and popping and missing like we were before. So that's a good news story as well.
And have there been crowds of people meeting you along the way?
Crowds, no. It's been a kind of a COVID tour. We were pretty much solo until we got to Moab, and then when we got to Moab, we started catching up with some of our friends. We had what do you think, Mike? About 15, 20 trucks with us in Moab.
Yeah,
close to that.
That's impressive.
And we did a big long run with a group of folks. Arizona Land Rover Club, Doug Lawyer was there with his big band, and he was taking some pictures for us. And we had a good crowd there. We did some easy trails there. We saw some dinosaur tracks. We saw some petroglyphs. We did some really cool switchbacks at some high altitude with some great views on it. That looked nice. Leaving Moab, we took about 6 guys with us to Colorado, and then we met up with some new folks in Colorado, some new fans we'd never met before. And they followed us around Colorado for a couple of days. And then we left Colorado and went down to Oklahoma, and we met some new folks in Oklahoma. That's where we met up with our friend Steve Hoare and Mark with Mickey, the 107 1957 Series 1 Land Rover. And Mickey and Oxford have been running together since Oklahoma. But we met some guys in Oklahoma. We saw the Buffalo with some new friends. We got in Arkansas, met some new friends in Arkansas, met some friends last night. The Tennessee Rover Enthusiast Club had a big showing they met up with us at the Lynchburg, Tennessee, at the Jack Daniel's Distillery. We probably had about 20 of those guys there. We went out to dinner at a big restaurant and had a big barbecue feed last night. So yeah, it's been no huge crowds, but spots of a couple good crowds. And I mean, we left Oregon with a huge box of T-shirts, and we're out now. So that tells you that we met some folks. Yeah, not so bad at all. Not so bad at all.
The folks that have been coming out, have they been bringing their trucks? And do you see more of a skew towards older or newer Land Rovers?
I'd say it's been probably a even bias between old and new trucks. We haven't seen anything really new, but some LR3s, LR4s.
Other than Bob's 110 you saw.
Yeah, well, Bob's 110. Bob doesn't count.
Oh, he'll enjoy hearing that.
Bob does count. We love you, Bob. But yeah, but Bob had. I mean, we had a lot of great fun with the 65 years between Bob and Oxford, pictures and moments. But the people that came out and visited had a mix of trucks, and some of them were super enthusiastic. We met a guy called Steven in Utah at the Otter Creek State Park. And he was just jumped out of his truck, and he was just super excited to see Oxford. Picked out his own copy of The Last Overland, nice. Crawled under the truck and took a drop of oil and signed his book with Oxford's oil, which we thought was kind of funny.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. You see, the only thing better would have been get Tim Slesser to do that. One
guy asked Mike and I to sign his book, which we thought that was kind of funny, but hey, that's okay. We did it. A lot of guys have brought their books with them. A lot of folks know the story. I mean, several folks are just like completely gobsmacked when they see it, like everyone is when you first see the truck. If you know what it is, you just sit there and you stare at it. You can't believe you're looking at it.
Right.
For Mike and I, it's an old conveyance now. We've worn poor Oxford out. But yeah, everyone that sees it new kind of reminds us it's really a special truck that we're with.
Are you splitting driving?
Yeah, we kind of just fell into alternating days. This is a Mike day. I'm in the passenger seat. Mike's in the driver's seat.
How's the ride? How many hours can you get behind the wheel?
How many hours we get behind the wheel? That's a tough question because you fiddle around all day. Like we went to Shiloh and walked around the battlefield for a little bit, Shiloh, Tennessee. That took an hour or two of our drive time, and we didn't drive.
But what maybe better questions? What are you averaging? Like 6 hours, 8 hours, 4 hours a day? What's in your head? Do you have a sense of that? We want to start driving at 8, which means we start driving at 9. And we get off the road at about 6 every day. Okay.
Some days we stop for lunch. Some days we don't. Okay. Sometimes we usually stop for gas in the middle of the day. We
kind of have to.
Yeah. Well, Oxford does really well with the multiple tanks and gin and tonic. Mickey's only got one tank, so we're tied to Mickey's schedule for fuel. But Mickey's does a little better on gas than Oxford does. But anyway, we stop once a day for fuel. We do about 200 to 300 miles a day. 300-mile days were our tough ones. I mean, they really are butt kickers. 200-mile days are hard. 150-mile days are nicer.
That's pretty good, though. I think you're making better time than I anticipated.
And we don't know. We're following the Trans-American Trail as best we can. Sometimes we get off it to go meet people and do things. But sometimes the Trans-American Trail is first gear, low range. Sometimes it's blacktop and you're doing 45 miles an hour. So you look at the map and you go, it's 150 miles, but it could be 150 miles in low range or it could be 150 miles on blacktop. So it's kind of hard to judge your day sometimes. We just make the best of it.
Right. What's the future hold?
So today we pull in the Tellico Plains and we camp out there. Tomorrow we are at the Biltmore, the Land Rover Experience at the Biltmore. The folks there at the Land Rover Experience are putting on a show for us that day. They're putting us up at the Biltmore, which is going to be exciting. We get to get in a nice hotel for the night. But we'll have Oxford do an event at the Biltmore. They'll do some trails and it will be shown off to a couple people. Did you bring your dress up clothes with you for the Biltmore? We have dress up clothes. We have clean shirts. I think we have one clean shirt left in our bag. I want you to wear the big G shirt. You should wear the big G shirt. No, a big G shirt will be terrible by tomorrow. But then after Biltmore, we go to Damascus, Virginia, which is right there on the border of North Carolina and Virginia. And then from Damascus, we roll into the MAR, the Mid-Atlantic Rally in Giles County. And that's our intermediate final stop. Wonderful. Well, that's Mar's coming up. And by the time this comes out, you'll have been to Biltmore and then you will be on your way to Mar. So things are looking good then. Yeah. Like I said, touch wood. I mean, every day's a new day. Every day there are new sounds coming out of the truck. I just noticed right now we've lost another knob off the dash. But that's I'm sure it's in the floor somewhere. Didn't vibrate out the front, did it? No, no, we haven't lost anything out the front. Too valuable. There, we got the knob back. There it is. Yes, but so far the truck's been great. It's doing what you expect it to do. It's getting us down the road, so you can't complain. The high moments of the trip was we were doing some passes in Colorado, and we were at 12,000 plus feet at this pass having lunch, and it's beautiful. I mean, if anybody's ever been to Colorado, you know what these are like. You go to these passes, you pull off to the side of the road, you lay your lunch out. It's clear blue skies. It's just, you could see for miles over these sweeping vistas. And we got to talking. So I picked the phone up and I called Tim Slesser and I said, Tim, hey, we're in Colorado at 12,500 feet. How are you today? And I had a short conversation with Tim, and we asked him about the how high did the first overland go in terms of altitude on their trip, because we couldn't remember. And we talked for a little while. He says that he thinks they got to 10,000 feet, but they really weren't doing high mountains. But the last overland guys wrote back and said that they got to 17,000 feet in Tibet. We're a little bit suspect based on how hard it was for Oxford to get to 12,900.
Behind what rope were they doing that?
Hey, well, they said it, so we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, for us, we were climbing serious. Bob was keeping us up to date with his new Defender because it has inclinometers all over it. But he said we were doing between 10 and 15% inclines going forward with Oxford at 12,000 feet, and the carburetor, which is still not really tuned great, was just struggling to develop power at that altitude. We were coming up to, we could see California Pass, 12,900 feet. We're probably 500 yards away. We're making the final push, and we're coming. It's super steep. It's one of those 15% inclines. And every time Oxford would hit a bump or a rock or get into a divot, you have to get that extra power to climb up out of that hole. And it just was, we hit a spot and Oxford cut off, and I could get it restarted, but I couldn't get it to climb out of the hole. So I needed to shed some dead weight and get the truck moving again. So I chucked Mike out. I said, "Get out and push, Mike." And then Mike got out of the back and gave us a little shoulder nudge on the back of Oxford, which got us up out of the hole. Then I could get Oxford moving on its own power again, and got it up to the top. And we said that was kind of a metaphor. It's been really it's a team effort making the truck move. It's Oxford, it's Mike, it's David, all of us putting 100% into the truck sometimes, getting it to get to where it's got to go. And we thought that was like a metaphor moment for the whole trip, the team effort getting up the hill.
Well, and I think it's safe to say that Oxford has reached its highest altitude in North America.
Yeah, I don't think we can get higher than 12,900. I mean, there's a couple places I think you get to 13 and a half, but we ran out of time. We had to make eastward. So if we had all the time in the world, all the money in the world, we would still be goofing off out west. You run out of time, you run out of money, you got to get back to home. I got to get back to work next month. I got clients calling for me. So right. we gotta, everything's on a timetable. So that's what we got to do.
Well, David, thanks very much for giving us the latest update on Oxford in America. As I guess, is it safe to say Oxford America is coming to a close?
This chapter of it, yeah, we're going to have one more big push out to the Atlantic Ocean in November to get. We started over in the Pacific Ocean. You saw the video of the tires in the Pacific over at Oregon Dunes National Park. Once we get the second week of November, we're going to be down in Cape Hatteras, down around Oregon Inlet, driving Oxford on the beach of the Atlantic Ocean, dipping her tires into the Atlantic Ocean, completing the ceremonial completion of the Sea to Shining Sea trip from left to right coast. And that's going to be the end of the trip. And then from there, we'll bring it back to the garage, do lots of tidy ups and repairs, and get it ready for the next adventure, which we think is still going to be New Zealand.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Appreciate you coming on and continue to enjoy Oxford.
Thanks, guys. And good talking to you.
And now on the Centresteer podcast, all the way from the United Kingdom, is Giles Chapman, journalist and writer of the new book, Land Rover, Gripping Photos of the 4x4 Pioneer. Welcome, Giles.
Good evening. Lovely to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. Is this your first podcast interview conversation?
Well, not the first time I've used the podcast. I've actually contributed to a podcast, no, but it's certainly the first one where somebody very gallantly is asking me to talk about a book I've just written. So, I hope I've got enough cogent stuff to say. And, it's obviously really, really great having written, what for a car journalist is quite a specialist book. And to sort of commune straight with people who are really into the subject. Also, I feel slightly wary. You're all going to know even more than I do about specific components in these vehicles. So,
Nah, you're in a safe place. You're in a safe space.
Very good.
It's all good. You're among friends. As people know, it's an enthusiast podcast that we go deep dive if we want to or not, and talk all about the Land Rover brand. So,
we tend not to count rivets or gear teeth here.
Okay, very good.
But it does come up, I should say.
This is quite a prescient day, really, because this is the day when my author's copies actually arrive for the first time. So you're talking to me. I'm holding the book here, and it's been in my possession for about 6 hours, literally hot off the press. So I'm still looking at it and hoping that it's it's as good as I wanted it to be. To give you a little bit of background about this book, there have been many books on Land Rovers, as we all know, and some
really
are enormously detailed. And I think of the kind of James Taylor book as being possibly at the top of the pile, and then there are others, and they're all extremely detailed. They lay out the specs of the different cars and the different models, and they go through the history with an absolute fine-tooth comb. But obviously, when I have those kind of definitive works, and you come to a subject like Land Rover, how can I do something different to it? And really, so what we thought we'd do with this is really create a Land Rover picture book where you try and get away from that issue of once you've seen one Land Rover series / Defender, you've seen them all, because they are pretty similar looking. And over an 800-page reference book with dozens and dozens of front three-quarter shots of the cars, you get a lot of tech, a lot of info, And what I wanted to do with this book is to try and capture sort of textures and landscapes with Land Rovers in them, so that even if you don't know much about Land Rovers, when you pick it up and flick through it, you want to sort of be there with a Land Rover, if you get my meaning. And I'm talking quite a lot about people who really probably never will own one because they're too scared. It's too much of a truck. It's too industrial. They think you need to take a driving test again for it. They won't be skilled enough, and so on and so on. And in this, here in the UK, these Defenders are all over suburbia. They're everywhere, and I think people see them going past, and they just yearn for one. It's the whole feel and look of these cars. I mean, you know better than most that appeal. So what I did with the book was to try to start initially with a picture hunt for what I thought were the most interesting and most textural type of photographs to go with it. And really, I was aiming to then write an introduction and sort of long captions to sort of describe some of the Land Rover appeal. And it's difficult when you set a concept like that. You've got to sort of keep true to what you're trying to achieve, and not get too bound up in the nuts and bolts of it, if you like, and also not make it so flowery or decorative that you guys would look at it and sort of go, oh, this is just Land Rover wallpaper, not worth considering. So it's a tough one.
Yep.
Really. Yeah.
How long had you been working on the book?
Well, I started having had a lunch with the publisher last year where we kicked the idea around. I really began, I'd say, sort of last summer, putting it together, and it took me on and off about 3 months. But I've been collecting the pictures and images that are in this book for 30, 40 years myself. So I've got a huge picture collection. You can probably see the maroon-coloured filing cabinets over here are bulging with old publicity pictures for things. So I had a good basis, and then I started looking through some of the Land Rover, promotional materials that us journalists can go in and rummage about in, and they've got about 6,000 or 7,000 different pictures, and I have been through all of those, and I have bought things on eBay. I've bought things at Auto Jumbles. I've borrowed things from people. One of my favourite pictures that you might enjoy is a Series 1 here, which you can see. I don't know if you can sort of see that, but that is a vehicle in Cape Town on the beach.
Oh wow! Is that a Series 1?
It's a Series 1 with a hardtop. Yes, if I hold it a little bit. I'm
going to make the video bigger. I realize our listeners cannot see the video, and you're not going to, but
but I mean the story of that picture alone. I don't know if you guys have something called Free Cycle over there. Do you?
Oh yeah.
You ever use Free Cycle? I just saw a little ad on Free Cycle saying huge box of old slides, must go or they're going in the bin. So I got round to this guy's house, and that image was on an amazing 2.25 inch color transparency. Wow. I didn't really know any of the history of it.
Yeah,
you free cycled that picture.
I was just so lucky to find it.
It's just an amazing photo. What page is that on for future references? When our listeners get the book, so they know what we're referring to. Is there a page number? Uh-oh, there we go. We found the error in the book. There's no page numbers.
Something's missing. It's about 2/3 of the way in.
Okay.
You can sit here and count while we're talking.
Yeah. So I mean, I wanted to have it to be like a visual feast of Land Rovers, where the facts would be right, but it's more that you could just enjoy landscapes and textures. And they gave me some very, very lovely a sort of matte paper. So as you can see, that hasn't got much of a shine on it. So it's got a with some of the sort of newer stuff. Like there's a bigger version of the cover image. There's so much sand and sea and background in that picture with the Defender sort of crawling its way along those rocks. But you never normally get a chance to use a picture that big in these kind of books, or even in magazine articles. Everybody always wants to have the sort of front 3/4 shot, the side picture, the interior. So it was for me a real visual job doing this book.
And the neat thing about that picture you just showed us, because there's so much scenery in addition to the Defender. I mean, the Defender itself looks really cool, but you've got all the rocks and you've got the sand and the other stuff there. The vicarious Land Rover owner who's reading your book can really imagine what's going on there and the trip that's involved in that. So it really adds something to the image by having all that extra background there.
Well, that's nice of you to say so. And as I said, I wanted to try to do something that didn't exist before this book. With a lot of the great classic marques, both American and European, the definitive histories have been written many years ago. I mean, I did a book on the Mini a couple of years ago, being 60 years old, and every single person involved with designing the Mini is now dead. So there's no chance of really being able to go back and re-interview them. And even if you could, some other sort of more historian type people have produced these amazing things that you look at and you think, the job's done, sort of. Right. That's not meant to sound defeatist.
No, you're right, though. The facts and figures have been pretty well covered.
Yeah, exactly. So here I just wanted to aim for something that, perhaps for all those who'll never actually have a Defender, they might have this in the living room.
Do you have a favorite?
For one thing.
Do you have a favorite image in the book? Is there one that stands out to you that you're maybe it was that one from South Africa, Cape Town, or an interesting story behind?
I've got quite a few pictures in here. I mean, you might remember that the half-ton military one, the lightweight. Here we have the instruction manual from Action Man. I think you know him as G.I. Joe.
Yes, I think that's right.
So he's our kind of crappy British version of G.I. Joe, basically. And you used to be able to get this big plastic military half-ton that you could make up. Even as you were assembling it from the bits, it was breaking. So it's got the way to put the headlights in here, but they would have broken before you'd even gone for the lug, if you like. So I just love this because I had one as a kid, and to have the sort of real vehicle over here, and then this sort of just this instruction leaflet on this side. I just think that might have been a bit of fun. And other pictures. I mean, this picture here is of a cattle market in Salisbury, town in the west of England, and it's a very, very rainy, grim-looking day with all these bedraggled-looking sheep in the front. And just here, somewhere to the right, is a Land Rover. So I bet that farmer is in the cafe somewhere having a big mug of tea and a bacon sandwich before he buys all these poor things and tows them off. That in this country, that used to be the standard territory for Land Rovers. They were sort of things that you only really saw if you either lived in the country or you stayed with your grandparents, in the country, and they had one. You didn't really see any of these series vehicles in towns. So. And that image, again, was a little 35mm tranny that I bought on eBay for £1. And I was just searching farming images and seeing what came up, And so there's no data to find on eBay. It's just a case of looking through the pics and sort of thinking, I like that one. So the book is full of all that kind of thing that appeals to me, and that I hope it then relays what the cars are about will appeal to you too.
I like you just showed that picture of the farming scene. The opposite page had 109-inch with a bucket lift in it. That's my sort of thing.
Yes,
that guy was doing some important things.
There we go. He's on a cherry picker, actually.
Yeah.
Something else. This is a show for local councils in the UK. So you get all the purchasing managers to go along, and they would, say, we've got to have one of these because we've got lots of trees in our area, or whatever. So again, it was a picture. Is a Land Rover photo, but hasn't really been used very widely. I had a quite nice picture of the Queen, Prince of Duke of Edinburgh there. Obviously, it's a sporting event.
Did she actually drive that series truck?
She was a really, really keen Land Rover person, actually. I mean, I've never seen her specifically driving an early series, but she's often been seen driving Defenders, Range Rovers. They're quite bound up with the royal family here. Right. They're often sort of seen at Sandringham or Windsor Castle.
She learned to work on the ambulances back in World War II and drove ambulances.
She's a competent mechanic, our Queen, which is little known fact.
Yes, yeah, we like to talk about that here on the podcast. It's kind of very cool, and the fact that she still would drive them, even driving a Defender, I think is still pretty cool.
And she drove the big trucks before the Land Rovers even existed. When she was in the Army, it was the big lorries that she drove those, which officially makes her a badass monarch.
Yeah. Plus, her favorite car is thought to be, we always have to say that because you never get any confirmation from the palace, but it's thought to be a Rover P5B V8 coupe, which is a
right
cool
on
by any by any measure.
We know she rode in series trucks because they have the special Royal Land Rovers that they created so she could stand in one for reviews. There's one or two at Gaydon at the museum there, and
they're interesting and notable for having this color scheme of dark claret with this sort of very very sort of bright crimson coach line, and that is the royal color scheme for all limousines. Goes right the way back to 1900, and they carried it through on those Land Rovers. So. That's the kind of fact I like anyway.
and if I'm not mistaken, I think all of those are donated by Land Rover. Like she doesn't actually pay for them. The government doesn't pay for them. They're like, oh, here, have the royal carriage.
That is a thorny issue that comes up every now and again. And I occasionally get phone calls from newspapers like the Daily Mail saying, have you got any, inside dirt on whether they just get freebies from Land Rover all the time? And very, very difficult to know, because they may not actually receive totally free, but they might get replaced every year, or they might be, kind of armor plated or serviced or something by the factory. There's certainly going to be a relationship there between the House of Windsor and Land Rover, but it's very difficult to get in and sort of.
Is that part of the royal warrant, perchance?
Yeah. That's right. That's part of the rule.
Maybe that makes sense then, that there's that exchange between providing service and product. Yes. You get the royal warrant then for.
Well, the newspapers here love to sort of, dig up a bit of sort of freebie taking occasionally and sort of make a big deal of it. But I don't have any inside line on all of that, except I know that they have a very close relationship. And in fact, the Queen has been to. She's done 3 visits to the Jaguar factory in her reign to sort of open various things, production lines, paint shops, and so on. And the Queen Mother had a Jag from the mid 50s. They've all had Land Rovers for a very long time, but they live quite a sporting outdoor life. They are genuine pucker users of those Land Rovers. They're not just driving them to the mall.
Right.
Well, they have important things to do.
The one that I want to know about that was featured in the Scotsman had an article is the Cuthbertson tracked vehicle. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Have you ever seen one of these?
Not in person. I've only ever seen photos.
Okay, well, I mean, I can just quickly look at the photos here, and they are incredible things. I mean, I believe they were built for a certain type of unusual marshy terrain in Scotland, where you have a lot of kind of valleys and kind of very, very difficult ground to traverse. But I mean, it seems like it's a combination of a sort of Land Rover and a tank, pretty much. They've got something like 16 wheels, I think, all the way around. And I can't even begin to figure out how the power is transmitted and how fast they go. I mean, but I don't think they're really meant to go very.
They don't go fast.
Land Rovers don't go fast. Then you add tracks to them, it goes even slower.
But I think the key thing is trying to spread the weight more even as well.
Exactly. That's what it's for.
Correct.
I think one or two of them have been used in sort of bomb disposal situations, or I believe. I haven't got an image of that. It's a classic sort of British weird men in sheds contraption. I think he only made a sort of 20 of them, but the production span is over 25 years or something incredible. Right. So it's less than one a year has been built.
I know they're also used in for snowcats traveling on snow and in the Arctic conditions. It's as I said, spreading the weight. And actually, I know we have a listener in Minnesota that likes tracked vehicles. So I'm sure he'll be salivating over the fact that there's a potential series truck that he could maybe try to track down that's a tracked vehicle.
I think it's the key Land Rover that needs to find its place in a computer game. I mean, that just looks like such a destruction vehicle, doesn't it? Yeah. Just who's going to take you on if you pick that?
Very true.
There is actually one in the United States.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, it showed up at the Mid-Atlantic Rally probably about 20 years ago. I think it was from Tennessee.
Even more rare, the fact that it's in the U.S.
Yeah, I think there's a place out Oklahoma or somewhere out there that has a Centaur, a half track.
Well, I think my publicist picked up on this and managed to get a piece in the Scotsman because it was made in Scotland.
So that was my thinking too. Yeah, right. Because they kept mentioning
very
Scotland.
Good on her angles, So he asked me about it in forensic detail, the reporter, and I sort of, I almost had to sort of say, stop. I've never actually driven one. But again, I think from my point of view, it just makes a nice picture because it's just so weird. I mean, I don't have to tell the conversation I normally have to have about Land Rovers with people is to explain how, effectively they're totally modular. Everything comes apart. You can lengthen them. You can add things, take things away. And I suppose that's a very good example of the how you can sort of add stuff all the time, which you just can't do with other vehicles. So it's a dream for tinkerers, really.
And then the other one that the Scotsman showed was the AA had their own vehicle. They seem like they don't use Land Rovers much anymore, but I think they did at one time. Their highway patrol vehicle, or Highland Patrol, I think they called it.
Yes. Well, again, that's just a lovely image of two guys really having to work hard to dig some Austin A70 out of the snow in the Highlands, and there's a couple of Land Rovers. It's a very nicely framed photo, actually. Can't even remember where I got it from. These are all the things that I've written a lot of general interest books on cars, and when you now start going through the history of the automobile, it's getting to be almost 140 years in length. And when you do sort of these general overviews of things, you can only ever sort of touch on the sort of milestone cars. You're always going to have to include the Beetle and the Mini and the DeLorean, and then you get to the Toyota Prius, and now we would be talking about the Tesla. General books fill up very quickly when you're talking about automotive history, because there's the stuff you've got to do, and there's never really a chance to use a lot of these images of the sort of weird versions and the funny situations that when you're given 160 blank pages like this, and you can fulfill your compilation dreams by doing it. I mean, I did a little sort of Christmas stocking filler book called The Land Rover Story about 5 years ago, and even that over sort of like 120 pages. They themselves have done so many vehicles, and we now include the Discoveries and the Freelanders, and then there's the Range Rover side angle and everything. And by the time you've used a picture of everything they've made, there's only room for one picture of each car. Again, here was a sort of a chance to really go off road with it, if you'll pardon the pun.
No, we like puns. Puns are cool. I'm also fascinated by some of those one-off uses. There was the one that the Forest Service used and had the big tires. Is that do you have that photo included in the book?
That's in here. I mean, you guys have probably seen in a lot of existing Land Rover books, or even just through knowing the subject a lot of these specific vehicles. I mean, here we go. I've got that's the one prototype one with a very nice sort of rural looking shot of one now. And again, I think these are cars are just bound to appeal to kids, aren't they? They've got daft wheels. It just looks like Hot Wheels in real life, really. Complete craziness.
And adult children too.
Yeah. Yes.
They actually made a bunch of those for the Canadian Forest Service to be used up in Northern Ontario. Who knows whatever happened to them, but there were some over here.
I suppose there are some of these strange versions. There's certain little corners of the world where they're needed, and I guess once someone has one or two, that specialist need is met, because all of these little one-offs and conversions and things, they seem to exist for a very, very short time. The basic Land Rover itself, I think even that in the end, in the latter years, it seems to be less and less adapted for things. I don't know why that should be. I mean, perhaps you can buy a lot more sort of specialist equipment now that is made in possibly Japan or South Korea. It's custom done for the job. It doesn't have to be done by some nutcase engineer, using his own sort of Heath Robinson style conversions.
Doesn't have to, but it's more fun that way.
Yes. But I mean, I sort of feel that, obviously the Defender in the last, 20 years has become much more of a sort of a lifestyle vehicle anyway. This is, I guess, what is part of the feeling of the Ineos people, is to try and sort of get back to what that was. Although, I mean, I think that's a whole other kettle of fish. We don't talk about that in the book, obviously, because heresy. because it's just a weird copy.
It's
so
cool heresy, but yeah.
Yeah, it's out there. Well, I think that shows the longevity of the original idea of the Land Rover being, as you said, modular and capable, and maybe not as reliable. All these uses, as your book is showing, all the different permutations that were out there, and now you have people copying the idea of it to continue that. I think it's actually, while some people may not like it, it's a what's the phrase? Copy is the sincerest form of flattery, right?
I do cover towards the end of the book. I've got a nice selection of the very last one going down the production line, and everybody's clapping in the Solihull work. They issued some lovely photos, and I was able to sort of really picture edit those down to some of the best. And it's for this country, it's a bit of that really was a sort of sad and slightly difficult to understand day. Why they had to kick it out. They could have found some smaller business who might have taken it on and kept making it under contract, small numbers, specialist uses, and so on. I mean, they say the fuel economy thing and the crash test thing are issues, and I do tackle those in the book, and I sort of use that to explain to people who don't know that it just, after 70 years, it just got to the end of the road and everything. But I think there's just a change in philosophy that somehow doesn't have room for it anymore. And I personally find that very, very strange thing to do. It would be like Porsche saying, well, we're just going to make Cayennes now because loads of people in China buy those. We're not going to bother with the 911 any longer because it's a pain in the ass to make. And
wait 5 years.
Yeah, well,
Giles, basically, that's the reason why they stopped making the Defender in the way, at least the way they used to, was because it was very difficult to produce compared to the modern world, and it wasn't selling.
And look what Jag is making now, and what they're not making.
Yes, but I can't believe that there wasn't a way that it could continue, perhaps in the hands of a subcontractor or somebody who would have a smaller production line and actually tackle the issues. Because if it is producing too much in the ways of emissions, obviously that's an engineering challenge, isn't it? It needs some sort of hybrid powertrain. The Ineos has got they're very proud to say they've got the same ladder frame chassis and the same hefty coil springs and so on. So I mean,
Ineos tried to do exactly what you're talking about. They tried to buy the rights to the Defender when they shut it down, and Land Rover said no.
I don't think philosophically Land Rover would be willing to subcontract it out if that was ever really a possibility, considering that you have, I think it was McGovern who came out and said and complained about accessory makers for the Defender at the time and said, they're taking our lunch, or we've left money on the table and we wouldn't do it. I think that JR wouldn't do it simply because they wouldn't have complete control over it, nor would they get every dollar or pound out of it.
They're worried about taking sales out of the dealership.
But you're waving goodbye to your great grandfather when you make the last one, and you're cutting a link. I mean, I am not bothering in my book with any of the other Land Rovers. Right. There might be a discovery in the background of a few pictures. I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking about Freelanders. I'm talking about the real things.
Because you don't have to. You got enough.
I have to, exactly. Yeah, I'm under no obligation to do that. And I'm not saying they're terrible. I'm just not concerned with them in this book. And we do get to 2016, and I feel that in my introduction and in the pictures, I do have to explain a little bit that because most normal people who love the look of these things and they're not aficionados like we all are, they would say, why can't you get one anymore? They wouldn't. They're not concerned with the regulations, are they? They don't care. They just, when they've got enough money, they want to buy one because they've always wanted one. And now they can't because they haven't used some sort of lateral thinking to keep it going. I don't know. I'm probably not explaining this very well, but it's part of this country's motoring fabric.
Absolutely.
You take it away, and there's this just chasm somehow. It's one of those, it's
sort of a different situation for us because
I'm welling up here.
We haven't been able to get them for a long time as new vehicles. So, it's a different sort of thing for us, obviously, but I understand where you're coming from.
I mean, also, this country prides itself on there's all the different small startups and interesting engineering approaches to automotive. The government never stopped going on about the West Midlands and how it's the incubator for talent, and they're going to sort of support startup businesses, and and we've got the racing car industry. We make loads of interesting sports cars. We do all kinds of things. We've got hydrogen bus prototypes running around. We've got loads of things going on. So I just can't believe that there isn't somehow space for this vehicle to continue. I just find it sort of strange that it's gone, really. But you never get used to the loss of a loved old relative, do you? So perhaps I'm just living in the past.
I understand it. I think most people understand it. Part of the underlying aspect of this is that the Defender should have progressed in a linear fashion, and it didn't. It was kind of like halted in the 80s, and there was a little bit of change over time, but it didn't. It just kind of stopped, and then there's this abrupt change to the new version, whereas that all happened with the Mustang, the Corvette, just being US centric, and those have kind of, and even Porsche has done that, where they've progressed, and Land Rover never did that really with the Defender. It kind of stopped, and I think that abrupt change is what is affecting you.
I didn't get into any of the British Leyland stuff in this book. There just wasn't the space, and sort of somehow it's a sort of, why would you want to rain on the parade?
Well, and that topic's been done to death anyway.
It has, but I've recently, in fact, this year, I've been writing a very big book on the history of Jaguar, because it's going to be 100 years old in 2022 if you take it all the way back to when they first started making motorbike sidecars. So that's
the Swallows, yeah,
correct. And it's an incredible story, incredible people. But you do get this. What makes it nice, because this is a detailed book about Jaguar history and not just a photo book. What makes it interesting is you have peaks and troughs all the time. If you're writing about Mercedes-Benz or Ferrari, it soon gets incredibly tedious, because how many words for fantastic and brilliant are there? And they won everything. The cars were the best, and oh yeah, all right, thanks, bye. Whereas with Jaguar, you've just got this. It's always on a teetering, basically. And that whole British Leyland thing, as I discovered, in my Jaguar researching, was the thing with the Jaguar XJ6 was they designed an amazing car, a brilliant piece of work. And because it was causing them the sort of least hassle, they didn't invest in anything to do with it. So the paint quality in the factory, and even the sort of year-on-year improvements, they did the absolute minimum, because they were firefighting in other parts of the company. And that really is exactly the same for Range Rover and Land Rover throughout the whole of the 70s. The Range Rover is launched, for example, in 1970. And after 10 years, virtually nothing has happened to it at all. I think, in fact, the 1980 models are the first to have any significant, changes at all. Mm-hmm. And so whatever wasn't going wrong, they just left. And that was definitely Land Rover. The Land Rover could just run itself. And whenever they did any reviews of what they could do with their portfolio, they were always sorting out the rubbish, and they just let these vehicles. Of course, that is exactly what you said a few minutes ago. That's where the stasis comes in. And, had it had the kind of corporate vitality at that point that it had at the beginning of its story, things might have been very, very different. So, that's a whole other area, isn't it?
I recall a quote when British Leyland got rid of Jaguar to Ford, a quote from the Ford VP or president for Europe, who the first time when he took, pardon me?
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. He'd only ever been in one factory worse and more ancient, and that was the Trabant or Skoda factory in East Germany.
No, it was the Volga factory in Gorky in Russia.
Okay.
That was right. Yeah, he said he'd never seen
Same idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. And they did, Ford, actually, to their credit, they did turn Jaguar around, and they never made any money out of it. They lost billions on that, and they had to give it away at the end, and just but to actually save the mothership.
Yes, to save Ford, it's right.
Yeah,
yes,
to save Ford itself.
Right.
So you flip this round, and in a way, it's amazing that these marks are even here, really. Yeah. So I can criticize Land Rover for dropping its Halo vehicle, but on the other hand, they're still going, and until 6 months ago, everything seemed to be going pretty well.
Yes, it was right. It was going to be. I think they were going to sell them like hotcakes.
Yes, but that was then.
Yes, and there's still a chance. In the end, I think it'll do well. The new Defender will do well, and I know people have seen them on the road here in the U.S. They're finally available.
Yeah, well, I've really only literally got a couple of pictures of that right at the very tail end of the book, because I thought I can't go to press in 2020 and just not put a couple of images in. And fortunately, they had released. I'm sure you've all seen all that beautiful sets of pictures of prototype testing that they've done for that vehicle in sort of Africa and sort of Arctic and so on. So we got a few little sprinkles of those at the end just to leave it on a positive note.
Right. Are you familiar with Oxford? Because we're very tied to Oxford here on the podcast. I've been following it for a long time. It is Oxford's currently in America, and this past when we're recording this, it would have been this past weekend that Oxford was with actually a brand new Defender in Utah and driving around. So there is that nice connection between those two vehicles.
Well, as you can probably tell from what I've just been saying, I can't help but sort of somehow get emotionally involved with all this, and particularly when you're writing books, there is no alternative. But at the end of when it all boils down to, you've got to go into a darkened room and write the bloody thing. And so any amount of meetings and talking and what the book could be, you are going to be shut away with that. And I've been shut away with Jaguar at least 4 months. I am currently sick to death of Jaguar. That won't show in the book. It will be,
no, of course not. No.
The biggest celebration you can ever think of.
Right.
But with these things, you have to sort of lose yourself in the subject a bit. And even with my Land Rover book, where I'm thinking quite visually, really, and just giving an overview of the history, you're moving through the history visually, and as we know, they're very related to colours, aren't they? You think of the early ones having that Avro green paintwork, and then there's they introduce a couple more colours in the 50s, and then with the Series 2, the bodies get deeper and the sort of the look of it changes. So you even with that, I was going to sleep some nights, just running through images of different Land Rovers and sort of going, well, shall I have that on the next page? Is it too early to have the county one there? And so yeah, it drives you mental.
What do you think of the county stripes on the side of a Land Rover?
Oh yes, they look all right actually, and everything looks all right given enough time and distance, doesn't it? It's like architecture. And I've just been into central London today for lunch, and I'm looking at some of the skyscrapers, the hideous skyscrapers they've been building behind St. Paul's Cathedral, ruining the look of the city. And it's. I'm sure my son in 40 years' time would go, "Oh, look at those! Aren't they? They're really from the 2020s. Those things, aren't they great?" So, I actually enjoy the softening up of stuff. And you very kindly mentioned a book I've written about the three different brands of British toy cars, Dinky, Corgi, and Matchbox, who were bitter rivals. And my book is really about the rivalry between those three brands and how they had their world in their hand until Mattel and Hot Wheels came along. So it's a good old, fighty type tale. But when I was a kid, they were really getting into making, they weren't making models of realistic cars anymore. It was all stupid dragsters with engines sticking out the bonnet that the driver wouldn't have been able to see around, and huge exhaust out of the side. And, my dad, at the time, all thought they were ghastly and hideous and naff. And now I look at them, and some of these sort of 70s, 60s, and 70s custom cars and dragsters, they're great. They're so full of imagination, and so
they're even more fun in full scale.
Yes. So I enjoy finding that I suddenly like something that I used to abhor, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
While you were talking, I looked up that other book, Britain's Toy Car Wars, Dinky versus Corgi versus Matchbox, available in paperback from Amazon, used $103.
Yeah, it's a rare book, that one. Really, really hard to get, and it's lovely,
And of course, you wouldn't see any of that, any cut of that $100 if you were to find it.
No, well, I mean, if you'd like some of the maths, I think many people, who don't know anything about publishing, they assume that when you walk into a bookstore and you pick up a book that you've written, that you basically sort of yours. You could almost walk out of there with it under your arm, and that would be fine because you own it. And my book is going to be £20, so I might get £1 for each one.
Really, that little? I thought it was a little more than that.
Well, the economics of it are quite tricky. So you don't get much for doing this. You have to enjoy it. You have to enjoy doing it, and you have to, I think, look forward to a time when you maybe. I've written about 55 different books, so I have quite an unusual back catalogue of stuff. A lot of it's offbeat. They vary enormously, quite successful to quite big failures, really. So if you have enough.
Not your books. You mean the subject of the books, right?
I just mean you can never entirely know.
No,
really. And I did a book 4 years ago about a vehicle which we have on our roads here. You may have seen a picture of it. It's called a Reliant Robin.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Have you all got them? I mean,
we don't have them, but I have seen Only Fools and Horses.
I was in Europe in the 70s and saw a bunch of them back then. That was kind of their day. But yeah, I think my biggest image of the Robin is when Jeremy Clarkson went about trying to keep one from rolling and put training wheels on it. And
well, all Reliant people hate that.
And still rolls it anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's Clarkson.
Well, Clarkson being Clarkson.
Yeah. But he's making mainstream entertainment and they are weirdos, so that's fine. But I mean, I thought if a little book on the Reliant Robin, that's bound to sort of hit a nerve with people, because even if you didn't own one, you probably used to see people driving around in them when you were a kid. Three-wheel cars, they're weird. The story itself is absolutely crackers. The whole story of it is fantastic. It's so daft and mad.
It'd have to be.
I spent a lot of time on this book, and I was really pleased with it. And it just didn't sell, And it's
much like the Robin itself.
The Robin did sell. I won't have a word against it. It did sell.
Did it? Okay.
Very well
for a while. For a while.
Well, it was wasn't it a motorcycle engine on a motorcycle kind of frame? I know there's not, but it was that was the kind of a motorcycle basis, I think.
Originally, yes, it was. It became a way to. A new car that was very cheap, and you'd never have to upgrade your driving license to a car driving license.
Okay,
gotcha. You pick a subject, as I was saying at the beginning of this long and possibly tedious diatribe about writing books. You then go into a darkened room with it, and you're stuck with it, and you hope that what you produce is going to somehow just hit the mark with people. And so
far what I've seen of your gripping photos of the 4x4 Pioneer, so far so good. You're hitting the right audience, at least with us.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
yes.
And I've got another couple of books coming out this autumn as well. One of them is about cars that have been used in movies.
Ooh,
but it's based on my collection of film stills, movie stills, from that just happened to have a car in, because it would just be an impossible book if you wrote your wish list and said, I've got to have this, this 150 films, and then you tried to go out and find those pictures. That would just be hopeless. So it's much easier to start with a good pictorial collection, and then you can, add the words in, really. And my background is in classic car magazines. I started on Classic and Sports Car in 1985. So my career has always been about putting things together against short deadlines. Monthly magazines, we used to have to, be shooting all our cars in the rain in Britain in the days before digital. We'd be allowed 8 color pages in a 120-page magazine. So your black and white stuff had to be good. So, in a way, it's a lot easier these days to sort of plan your work compared to, those far off publishing days, pre-computers and everything, when we all had to be total geeks about classic cars. You couldn't work on a magazine like that unless you've got sort of a weirdly encyclopedic knowledge of the stuff, right? Because your readers are going to know more than you otherwise and going to find you out.
I'll throw an idea to you that I'd like to see, because I've done a little research. I'm not going to be writing a book ever on this, but
Can I just get a pen?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah. It's real easy. Famous Land Rover owners. Paul McCartney had a series truck. He wrote a song about it. Of course, the Queen has had one. There's two. I just watched the Elton John movie, and there was a Land Rover in there, and so I'm wondering, did Elton John really have a series truck when he was starting out back in the day? Don't know, but that would be kind of cool. Those guys, see people that have over time, especially when they were usually British, but they would have an old series truck or a Land Rover back in the day.
Don't forget Steve McQueen, legendary badass. He's had cool Jags and Land Rovers.
Yes, and a Mini Cooper. But I mean, that is a good example of a project I wouldn't like to do unless somebody could say to me, "Hey, look, I've got this box of all these famous people with their Land Rovers. Is there any way possibly we could turn it into a book?" But to actually go out,
get on Free Cycle.
Yes, I don't think I'm going to have that kind of luck again. Actually, unfortunately.
No.
So and I also want to do. You bring that up as a playful idea, but that is a lovely idea. That would make a beautiful.
It was actually not playful. It was actually an idea of every now and again I see someone there's a famous person or a musician, something has one, and I go, did they? That's cool. Do they really have it? Do they still have it? Did they care? Was it just a transportation for them, or was it a thing? Like with McCartney, it seemed like a thing because I had to find the name of this. I'm sure listeners know what the name of the song was, but it was in his Wings period.
On Wheels.
What?
Helen Wheels.
Helen, right, because the vehicle was named Helen. Then he named it Helen, so he called the song Hell on Wheels, and he apparently drove it from Scotland down to London, and there was a famous drive they had, and that's what the song's about.
Well, would you widen this to include early Range Rovers, or do we not talk about it?
No, absolutely. No. I that's as far as I've gone with my ideas. That's like I watch Jay Leno's Garage. You may not get that over in the UK. But
we do. You do get that? Good.
And
he's at home a lot at the moment, so he's going into overdrive on his stuff, isn't he?
Yeah. And I like the parts I like the best are when he has some celebrity on and they talk about cars because they, like Billy Gardell. I just happened to see this one. He's a Pittsburgh comedian, and he talks about how when he finally got some money, he bought a 57 Chevy, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. So Billy Gardell's a car guy. That's my fascination with it.
That is a nice. I mean, I'm a little sort of worn out through writing at the moment to even think about the next book. But
so you said you have other books coming out. So if you got the Jag book coming out in 2021, you have. I'm sorry, 2022. Then you have what was the other one coming out this fall?
Well, I've done a little book called Cars on Film, which it's about. It's based on my collection of old movie stills, which have cars featuring in them. So some of the films are very obscure, some of them are famous, but I'd already got like the picture package, and actually researching it was great to do, but it took months.
Sure.
And unfortunately, as you probably know, there's this wonderful website called the Internet Car Movie Database, which
yes.
I mean, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to identify quite a lot of the cars because they're often just incidental, and you find yourself trying to see if the clip is on YouTube, and even if it is it clear enough that you can see what that vehicle is or whatever. So I mean, I've spent a long and a kind of industrious amount of time on that, because I'm always as a writer, I always try to find things that I feel haven't been done to death or in a way that I can do them, because as you know, there are I mean, so you can see by my office behind me, I've got hundreds of books in here, but there's just been so much written over the years. And when I was asked to do the Jaguar book by Motor Books, so there's an American publisher, it's very very nice to work for them.
I've been to their place.
I said, yes. And then I put the phone down and I just thought, how am I going to make that different to the enormous body of work that has already been done by some very eminent researchers and historians? Not all Jag books are well written. In fact, not all car books are well written. So, to try and write a good one is a lofty aim, but I try to do that. But I tried with this book that I've been working on to accord the same enthusiasm for all the periods of Jaguar history, and not just sort of say, well, the XK120 and the E-Type and the XJ6, they were all great, and not sort of say that all the good days were in years gone by. Because if you drive an F-Pace or an F-Type or even the I-Pace, an amazing vehicle actually, the good times are now. So you don't want to pick up a history of Jaguar and get to the end and the author just tails off and goes, oh well, these are all shit and it's nothing like as interesting as it used to be, and it has to carry the enthusiasm of now, and go all the way through the cars that you don't like. For example, the X-Type, which is a horrible looking car, but it's if you've got one, you're a Jag man, aren't you? You don't want to be told that you're wrong. And it's why this book has been quite difficult to write, but it's trying to sort of find enjoyment and interest in all the more recent things. The E-Type is a very long time ago, 61 to 71. That's 50 years ago that the E-Type left this world. So that's a bloody long time, really. Right. So it was good to try and sort of stretch the story out and make sure that, as I say, have all the enthusiasm in the house, what some people call the halcyon period. I've always been a big fan of the Jaguar XJS. I don't know if you guys know that car.
Oh yeah. I'm a fan of the XJS. It's got a weird styling, which was probably ahead of its time. But my only gripe about the XJS was the god-awful 12-cylinder engine they put in them.
Well, okay, the engine's all right, but it just doesn't work.
Well, that's just it. When it's running right, it's sweet, but 10 minutes later, you're upset.
It's a much misunderstood car. It's extremely successful. It reached the peak of its powers 14 years after it was introduced. Just think of that. It
took that long to get it right.
Yeah, but it somehow had a stay of execution that meant it could catch up. And, it's always been slagged off as, nothing like as good as E-Type. It was never supposed to be an E-Type. It was, if you look at the philosophy of William Lyons, he was trying to do something completely different. But for a lot of external circumstances, it would have beaten the pants off Lamborghini and everybody,
Right.
But we sometimes labor under these old ideas, when you're able to sort of do a big history like that, you can I felt like I could sort of remedy some of it, put it into context and sort of say, actually, this was an amazing car. I hope this chimes with what you like reading about stuff, and you just don't want to reread reheated, outdated opinion on things. So anyway, I had to try and find some way to enjoy doing it, and that was it.
You're talking basically about historical context. You're putting the vehicle in context at the time and for what it meant, what it was supposed to do, and it's easy to look now back upon it and see what happened and apply current standards. You really, I think what a good journalist and a good writer would do is to say, at the time, this is what was happening, and this is why this was important. This is what they were trying to do. Maybe they missed the mark, but they were trying to do that based on this. Same thing with the Defender, like they were trying to do something and then they just stopped, and then the world moved on and they needed to move on. Kind of a corollary.
Somebody who goes out and buys a brand new Discovery Sport, anything, or an F-Pace Jaguar, they are people with more discretionary spend than most, so they're able to go for a sort of premium product rather than a Hyundai or a Ford, and they buy into the marketing and the image, and possibly they've seen these vehicles around, they find them very attractive, and they don't always, to my mind, totally comprehend what the heritage and the backstory is. So if you were to sort of hand them a mark book written by in immense detail, technical stuff about it, that's going to not help. I wanted my book so that anyone who does drive a modern Jaguar would actually be able to sort of. Sorry, we're talking about Jaguars. Who cares about those?
No. Harold's a big fan is a big Jag fan, and JLR, Jag Land Rovers together. So we're cool. You're cool.
But I wanted them to be able to sort of understand 100 years of history, because it's rather like the Land Rover story. It's a very weird story. How does a guy go from a shed in a seaside town, bolting a sort of seat with a wheel onto the side of a motorbike, to winning Le Mans within 30 years? It's amazing. And then, how does
winning Le Mans 5 years straight?
Yeah, well, exactly. And then how does a name that's so great that enter this sort of, spiral of decline? What are the factors? And then, what are these new Jags? How come we now can get a Jag that's a bit like a Land Rover? That's also a sort of weird factor. What I wanted to do for the general market is to be able to sort of put it all into context where I'm not repeating any of the old motoring journalist grumbles about stuff. And, you could hopefully get to the end of it and sort of think, oh, now I understand. And that's what Robin Reliant owners don't want to do, clearly. Sorry, I said Robin Reliant. I meant Reliant Robin.
Changing topics slightly, but it's actually on the same topic. I think you're a person that needs to come to Pittsburgh in July. There is something called the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. I know the listeners have heard us talk about this 1,000 times because we always talk about it.
Really?
It is a very cool car show and race. It is the only, or the last, or the only, maybe that's the same thing.
Only remaining vintage car race that runs on city streets.
Oh,
yes.
Is it? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is a pvgp.org, Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. And
Yes.
so there's a big car show that happens on one of the weekends, and then there's also racing going on the city streets. And but that's where you see all of the cars you've been talking about. That's where I have seen a Robin Reliant there. All the Jags come out, back in the day. Harold knows the models. I don't know the models, but and of course we've over the last, I'd say 5 or 10 years, we've been upping the Land Rover quotient and getting more Land Rovers to show up on the site. But there's also Aston Martins, and then there's a German section, there's a British section, there's an American section of all these. It's just hundreds of cars come out.
Yeah, it's a whole international car show. I mean, there's American cars, imports of all types, but then the show within the show is the British Car Day, which is like, it's a special event.
And does it get people who understand already or who keen to know about them? I mean, do you find you introduce these vehicles to for the
about
first
half and half, maybe?
It's a free show. The car show is, and it's a day out for some folks, and they can see the old cars, and hang out with them and ask questions. We like to, most people take their car and then they go watch the race, or they go under a pavilion somewhere, and Land Rover people tend to stick by their trucks and sit there all day next to them, and then people come by and we talk about the trucks and happy to talk about them and explain
work on them. And
sometimes you need to work on them. Yeah. You have Aston Martins, Rolls Royce, Bentleys, lots of because the British Car Day part is sponsored by the Western Pennsylvania Triumph Club or Association. And so there's a lot of Triumphs. There's a lot of MGs, for that. Yes. But then we've kind of glommed on as part of British Car Day.
Surprising number of vintage Rollses show up. Old silver ghosts and yeah, I mean, a lot of really cool stuff.
Yes. That sounds like a lovely day, really. And it's can you do all this in a day?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to, do you?
Yeah. It's British Car Day is literally that. We will walk around once or twice and take a look at the cars. And admittedly, if you go year after year, you see a lot of the same things, but you will also catch something new that may come out. There's Izettas. People bring their Izettas out. We actually have a friend. She'll take her. I just got in my head, Harold. Ashley's
Volvo P1800.
Volvo P1800. She'll take that, and so there's a lot of those. And then there's the racing going on. By the way, while we're doing this, then there's also these pre basically 60s cars. They're racing around the track, and it's a really cool event.
Does sound lovely, actually. I'd love to come. I hope they manage to get the British ambassador out of Washington to go to that. We should be. I mean, here, we have a very full calendar of events every year. Obviously, we're a tiny country. I'm sure we can fit into just one of your states. But
two, actually.
With the exception of Rhode Island.
But we have we've got a lot of annual fixtures, and all this year everything has been cancelled. Early September is always great for a thing called the Bewley Auto Jumble, and they have a Land Rover fair there as a little sort of sideshow. I think they call it something like the Land Rover Sort Out, or the Land Rover Rummage, or something like that.
Oddbury Sort Out.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Have you been?
No, I haven't, unfortunately. I have many friends that have.
Yeah, I don't even know what Sodbury Sort Out means. That's just typical loony way of calling it a Land Rover show. But it's always really, really nice to go and have a look around that stuff. And it's a little bit like it would be a mini version of Hershey. This, very but messy, muddy, and lots of old grumbly people around who won't let anything go, no matter how silly your offer. But I've been going there for years, and it's always it's one of the victims of what we're going through at the moment, as are so many of the other. Same
thing here. Everything got shut down. All the shows have been canceled that we usually go to, and similar to the UK, what happens in America.
We do have a sort of growth thing here in enthusiasm for old vehicles, and that is a lot of people get very, very pissed off with having to pay 20 quid to go into a classic car show. Sorry, that's $30, you know, into a classic car show that's in a conference center. It's all inside. And, you know, you look at cars behind railings and maybe you might get to talk to a few of the owners clubs, but it's you know, you come away from it, if you've been going to them a few years, you do think this is pretty poor value. And a lot of people have now moved away towards sort of pubs out in the country, which they have an arrangement with the landlord and sort of say, on Sunday morning, could you open early and do, you know, breakfast and coffee, and then we'll just invite people to bring cars to the car park. So these coffee and classics things are a big growth thing in Britain.
We call that cars and coffee here in the US.
Yeah, they're a big thing here too.
Yeah.
And you don't actually have to sort of pay an entrance fee or queue or anything like that. You just turn up, grab a coffee, and just wander around the cars. Right. It's so nice, and it's getting it away from these you know, organisers who can be quite exploitative of the of the public. They're not really, they're just bothered about the gate, really. They don't care about the show. But in this case, the show is put on by the owners, and you just never know what's going to be in the pub car park. So it could be a sort of a Daytona Spider next to a Hudson Hornet next to a whatever. So these are great things that they are the big, to me, that's the big shame that they're not happening this year. I've been to all these shows many times, and I don't mind if I don't go to them again in a way, but I do like going out with a couple of mates and a couple of ropey old cars. We get up early on a Sunday and, you know, just go and just bore each other stupid with, you know, walking around whatever happens to be there.
So you've listened to the podcast. Okay. I'm leaving that in. So
I mean, you might be interested to know, I'm actually part of the brotherhood here. I've got a 76 Range Rover.
Dude, you lead in, you didn't even know this. So my question was, what are you driving? And what's your Land Rover history?
That's the questions we ask every guest.
Could you please just ask me, what am I owning rather than what am I driving?
That's true. It is a different question. Because, normally, how many do you have? What do you have? And what's operational?
Well, I have this Range Rover, which I bought in a bankruptcy sale in the north of England 4 years ago. I found it online. I couldn't believe it was actually listed as a Land Rover. And I said to the auctioneer...
Technically it is.
Well, I know, but, you know, the girl in the office didn't type it in properly. So I said to the guy, "Oh, that looks great." And I knew this man. He said, "Yeah, well, you can bid for it if you like." And I forgot. And so I rang him up the next day and said, "I'm really annoyed with myself. I didn't enroll in time and missed it." And I said to him, "You know, if the guy doesn't come and take it away, you know, maybe let me know." And you only ever say that. You never really expect anyone to ring you in 2 weeks' time and say, as he did, "Well, this punter hasn't turned up, so are you still interested?" And I just went, "Oh, yes, okay." I haven't cleared it with my wife, and she does own half of my stuff, you know. So I sort of said yes, and he said, "Fine, it's yours." The bids went to 3,800. Big silence. And I said, "Well, how about 3.5? And he went, "Yeah, okay, done. But it has to be out of this yard on Friday morning." So I don't have a trailer, and I had to just go on the internet, find somebody with a trailer. It's a vehicle with no keys, no documents. No one knows how it got into the country because it's left-hand drive, and we think it was from France somewhere. I'd never seen it, but I kind of thought, well, you know, $5,000, how wrong can I go? It must, you know, these are quite sought after. So and the next thing was I just, you know, paid over the money, and then 3 days later a stranger turned up with it. He could have just buggered off and taken it anywhere there were no documents. I could have just lost that in transit.
And what is it exactly?
It's a 76 two-door.
Ooh.
So it's a B series car.
Oh, nice.
And pretty rough. But not as rusty as it could have been. The ceiling, the roof had no lining. It had just been using that stuff called Artex, you know, that you do walls with.
Oh, yeah.
Artex. And then there was just a jam jar rammed into the Artex for the courtesy light in the middle.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like it. Why is that picture not in the book? The picture of that should be in the book.
So that's a whole new book, I think.
Well, I
the
love
weird junk I've come across.
Yeah, but I love Series 1 Range Rovers, and as you probably know, they are very hard to find, and so I couldn't resist it, really.
What is the current state of said Series 1 Range Rover?
This is 2017. So a friend of mine is doing the work, but as you also, I'm sure you will know, once it comes to sort of mates rates, it's fine in theory. It's very difficult to hold the person to account and actually get anything done to any specific deadline. And because he has a garage, it's always going to the back of the queue.
Right.
So, it is the pace of work is glacial. But we have got it painted. We've got the whole chassis is good. The engine's all right. Gearbox has been rebuilt. I've got the trim remade. It's white, so it's quite forgiving. Even if the paint isn't brilliant, it's still going to look all right. And it's got that sort of biscuit-coloured vinyl trim inside. I've now owned it so long that when I started, you couldn't get half the stuff, and most of it is now back in manufacture. So I spent £1,800 on window seals and black rubbers because once we got the paint looking nice, you can't put the old stuff back on.
Nope.
Awful. And that has all gone back into production in the intervening period. So apart from the extremely painful check I had to write for it, it is edging towards being finished. But one of the big problems is my wife knows about it, and she won't let me off the hook. And she keeps saying, "When is that car going to be done? When are we going to sell it? When can we get a bigger house with the proceeds and all the rest of it?" So I haven't even driven it yet, and it's
already sold.
Yes.
So one way or another, it's a house. You're selling it to get a bigger house, or you're going to be living in it.
Well, what it is if you decide that you're going to go out and buy a bargain, and you're going to start looking through small ads for cars or going through online sales, you won't find a bargain. Opportunity just has to be taken when it comes along. Often you just have to buy it first and ask questions later, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So, but I'm not actually an engineer. I can't rebuild a car, so I'm out of my comfort zone. Give me a pencil, I'm fine. Give me a spanner, and I start crying.
What else do you own then?
Well, I have something called this isn't an issue of pride. It's called a Newsom Duke. They make them here, and my wife said, "Get me a car that I can't get carjacked in." So,
there you go.
Is that the one they had the TV commercial with the squirrels driving it?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah. Yes. You're
maybe.
right.
But of course, it's a vehicle.
It looks like the Kia Soul.
No, it's more of a sort of beach buggy look than that, actually, in a way. It's quite a sort of swoopy thing. There's a Toyota one that's a bit of a copy of it as well. They're silly looking cars, but they work quite well. And they don't break down on country lanes, which is great.
That takes the fun out of it.
And I got my son a something, well, here it's called a Toyota IQ, but there I think it's called a Scion IQ.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Yeah.
It looks like a car with no front or back.
Scions actually don't exist anymore. They stopped that line, but yeah, there's some Toyota something. Yeah.
But being 18, he's just not interested in cars. When he has a driving lesson, he oversleeps, and the woman is outside hooting, and I have to go out and pay her, and he just goes, "Oh, sorry."
His father's an automotive journalist, and he hasn't taken to.
Kids aren't what they were, as you probably know. So,
kids are useless sometimes.
So that just sits outside my house on flat tires, and so I'm a shambles.
What are you driving? What's your daily right now? What's your daily?
Well, that will be my wife's Nissan whenever I can get.
Okay. What if, like in the past, I suspect you've owned a number of cars, but any highlights that you wish to let us know about?
Well, are you sitting down?
No, but
okay.
But that's okay.
I've had loads of things. I've had my first car was a '67 DeVille convertible
Cadillac,
which I brought over from Baltimore.
Yeah, that's not something you hear Brits say. Their first car was a Cadillac. That's special.
Stupid, and there was a classic car dealer in South London who said he could get me just about anything I wanted if it was American.
And you decided to test him.
Well, I wanted something with a big engine, so it's a 7.7 litre V8. Oh, yeah. So we had a lot of fun with that.
Convertible or hardtop?
Yeah, convertible. Yeah, power top. It was a great car actually, and what a brilliant piece of kit. It worked so well because it was ancient when I owned it.
No, wait a minute. That car had to be what, 50 feet long? How are you getting it around the B roads of the United Kingdom? I didn't think that thing's too long, isn't it?
Well, we didn't have sat nav of any kind in those days, so you just have to kind of know the area very well. Walk it first, and then you can work out where you could go in the Cadillac.
Oh, there's another book.
Oh, you got to remember that.
I had an American girlfriend too, and she was absolutely great at driving it. So that was good. She could handle something.
It was left-hand drive.
It was left-hand drive. Yeah, it was lovely. It was a great toy, and So and then I've been a car journalist for years, many years freelance, and so I used to kind of vacillate between having something that worked so that I could turn up on time for things. And then I'd get bored of that, and then I'd have to have something stupid that I could get a story out of. So I bought a Ford Escort for £100 once, and the idea was to try and see how far I could get in a car that costs £100, which at the time I think you could get a couple of shirts from a nice shop in London for the same money. So that was the story, and I did about 3,500 miles before it just conked out.
There you go.
And then I thought, this is stupid. I've got to have something sensible. So I got a VW Golf, and then I got bored of that. And then I've had Saab 900s. I've had a Mercedes CE, which was okay. I had the engine rebuilt because it was smoking. And then when I drove it out of the guy's workshop, got 5 miles away, it smoked in exactly the same way. So that was I just quickly had to sell that, really. And I've had various sort of British cars and Japanese cars. I mean, we get us car journalists. We tend to get, if we go to a drinks party, we tend to get the same 3 questions from everyone.
Right.
What's your favourite car? So that's I usually say I like a Bristol 411, and then they just walk off. Do I know Jeremy Clarkson? Yes, I have met him. And I haven't been punched by him or anything. So I haven't got, he hasn't put me in hospital or anything. So that dies. And then the other one is, people want to know what to get. And if it's,
I hate that question.
If it's friends of my wife's, they'll say something like, I was sort of thinking, what do you think I ought to get? And I always go with Japanese brand cars, because with a recommendation, you just never want to hear again that recommendation wasn't right. So I'd never say get a Citroen ever, because the electrics are so poor. So I'm always recommending Hondas and Toyotas, and I hate myself for it, really.
Oh yeah, well because it's the people that ask you are not car people. They're looking for transportation. They're not looking for anything fun or exciting or interesting. And that's typically my role. Oh, hey, that's a really cool Land Rover. Like, no, you don't want it. You don't want it. Don't even think about it. Go buy a Toyota. Go buy a Honda. Go buy a Ford. Go buy a something else.
I just tell people to get an Uber. If they're not car people, just get an Uber. Just don't buy a car.
I remember recently I recommended a Honda to somebody, and this very attractive woman I was talking to, she went, "Oh God, a Honda? Boring. I want a BMW 3 Series." And I said, "Well, you could get that, but your running costs will be 50% more. Everything, servicing, tires, and it has a greater likelihood of going on for no particular reason."
Yep.
Compared to a Honda.
Yes.
But again, she walked off. So.
Yep.
What can you do? But yeah, that is those are our 3 nightmare questions as car writers, or whatever car journalists there are left after COVID, I should add.
Have you ever owned a Land Rover that was drivable? Oh, he's pausing.
No, I thought you were going to say drivable, and then
no, just drivable. No, because you own a Land Rover now. It's just not drivable. So
have you ever purchased a Land Rover you were able to drive home?
No, Your Honor, I have not. But I mean, I've been in and around Land Rovers a lot. I mean, we mentioned Jerry McGovern earlier, the sort of design director, and I interviewed him when the Freelander first came out. So I've done a lot of writing about them. I've been to Solihull loads of times. It's one of those makes that I think you can come back to time and again, because there's so much to go at. They're so interesting. That's the thing. And I've done some work recently on a couple of Ferrari books, and I don't enjoy writing about Ferraris. I mean, I don't write about them, but I've worked with another couple of authors where I've helped them with their books. And Ferrari people get completely carried away with chassis numbers, engine numbers, and race numbers of the various Ferraris, and it makes writing about them in the material unreadable. Whereas this Land Rover and Mini, Jaguar, Aston Martin, all these makes, I always think there's just so much to get your teeth into that I like.
Start out saying they're versatile, they're customizable, and people have done that. It's one of the, I think, few makes that I can think of, models that are customizable, and you can make them personalized to you and what you need to do. I think the Beetle was that way, and the Land Rover. I'm trying to think of anybody. I can't think of any others that. Well, maybe the Volkswagen minivan. I'm thinking of personalized ones that would be personalized.
The Model T Ford.
Good call. Good call, Harold. Yeah, exactly.
If I had to be brutally honest, I think you're not going to like this, and probably I think this meeting will end when I've said it. And that is, I think I do probably prefer Mark 1, Series 1 Range Rovers overall to Land Rovers. I love the design of them. There's nothing else like it. I love the backstory of that, how they managed to sort of get that Skunk Works project almost, through the door. In fact, recently I went to Gaydon, the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. I did a piece for a magazine here called The Automobile about the Road Rover. Do you all know about that?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
They've got both the prototypes there, and they were actually able to get them out of the museum for us, and we sort of pushed them up. They pulled them, I should say. I didn't push anything. Their curators pulled these vehicles onto a little grassy knoll at the edge of the site there. We could just about do some pictures without any hideous buildings in. And it was just amazing to be able to crawl all over those two prototypes. They just left us, for the whole morning to get to do the shoot, and to see how they, how far back the Range Rover Genesis goes. It really does go back to very shortly after the Land Rover itself was launched. And I sort of sat in both of the prototypes, and they're great. They're really good. So I love all that. I love the way the sort of the Rover thinking used to be, within the company. Yeah, everything they did, it was so sort of resourceful, and the way they operated. The day they got all caught up into takeovers and everything is such a shame, because I think it killed that can-do attitude they had. They had a small nucleus of people, very, very clever, and when they needed to do something like getting hold of the V8 engine, they went out and did what we would think of doing. We'd sort of think, well, we could design an engine from scratch. Well, maybe we could just see if we could get one from somewhere that would work. It's just
let's go buy the Buick.
The Buick motor, and I love that. I love that sort of tight Rover band and what they did. And they were a very small group of people, really. How they managed to sort of navigate that little company through the sort of 50s and 60s.
Right.
That's fantastic. And in fact, William Lyons, the Jaguar guy, he sort of killed that spirit a bit himself, because once he'd engineered the merger between Jaguar and BMC and to create British Leyland, he got himself so much power that he could kill off anything that he thought was a threat to his company. So the Rover BS, the mid-engined sports car, he was able just to kind of go, well, that can go. The Rover Alvis, the sort of two-door P6, killed that off. He killed off the bigger P8. He got rid of the Austin Healey with a Rolls-Royce engine. All these cars. He was a big power broker then, and he was able to sort of say, nothing's going to threaten my precious Jaguar.
So you're saying that Jaguar then caused the demise of other brands?
No, I
oh no.
It killed
the history of British Leyland is much more different than that.
It's just he made sure that he squashed his rival.
But
right,
and that.
But he was But he was also a reflection of the leadership of the different British car companies of the time, because you had William Roots, who was very much in charge of Roots Motors. You had Black with Standard Triumph. You had the Wilkes brothers at Rover. You had Lion with Jaguar. These were, titans of leaders of companies that created some fantastic vehicles and fantastic companies, but there was no succession planning left in there either. That, when they did merge, there was no one to take over.
Yes, I totally agree. But I was talking more about the spirit with which the original Land Rover, Range Rover, P6, all these other things were actually created. They managed to still keep going with the S1 a little bit. But then, you look at a car like the Rover 800 from the mid-'80s. I mean, it's so dull, it's so boring, it's so lifeless and sort of lacking in, well, obviously it has a completely different backstory, but, where is the sort of spirit gone? It isn't there anymore.
Committees.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the different vehicles you've owned, and you don't like being asked about your favorite, but let me ask you this. What was the stupidest car you ever bought?
Well, that's a good question. I think I've only ever bought one brand new car, because, of course, all new cars are a very poor purchase decision, because once you've bought them, they sink like stones. And that was, I bought a Fiat Barchetta, which is a little two-seater. You could only get them in left-hand drive, so it had to be left-hand drive in London. But I love the styling of this car, been on the launch of it, and I thought I'd just love one of those. Great car, loved having it, but I chose orange as the colour.
Oh, dear.
And when I tried to, when I got married and my wife said, that has to go. I'm painting this awful picture. She's a wonderful woman.
What year was this?
This is 1995. So,
it's not the right period for orange. Yeah.
And then when I tried to sell it, the first question everyone asked was, hello, I hear the Fiat's for sale. I said, yes. And what colour is it? It's orange. They all wanted a silver one. I've always sort of rather disliked silver cars because they're so boring.
Tell them it's sunset red.
Yeah. So I mean, that was probably the least well considered purchase. But I mean, my Cadillac was an impulse. I was editing a classic car magazine at the time. My publisher said, "You don't have a classic car. You ought to have something." So that was a great day when that arrived. But it does tend to the gallon. It's totally impractical.
So you had two great days: the day you bought it and the day you sold it.
Yes. Isn't that the same with all cars?
And boats and airplanes and.
But I've only ever had one car I got my money back entirely for, and that was a Nissan Bluebird. I was driving along a dual carriageway in London, and I had to brake suddenly to avoid a bus. The wheels locked up, came to a halt, and I was just having that breather when I hadn't died in a car crash that you get, and all of a sudden a van went straight to the back of it and showered me with glass, just completely destroyed the back end. And it all seems to take forever while it's happening, but it was a few seconds. Anyway, this guy apologized profusely and sort of basically said it was his fault. I went home in the car, it was drivable, and rang up to sort the insurance out, and they said to me, what about the car? And I said, well, are you all right? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And the woman said, so what did you pay for it? And I said, £400. And I said, but I think it's written off. She said, well, if we could settle now, I'll just bike the money over to you. So the next day, a courier arrived with 400 quid. And I mean, I just taped up the window and then scrapped it. I liked all those. I loved to have a lot of these cars. I could get a stupid story out of one way or another that I could sell to newspapers. So I had a Saab 99 that was all right. But I've had a Range Rover before. I had a four-door, a Series 1 four-door, and that had one of those. Have you ever come across this mystery lack of braking on any of your vehicles? just the brakes just weren't there. So it would be fine for the first half an hour of any journey, and then you'd realise that you just didn't have any brakes. So I then have to sort of like plot a route back, and I kept taking it to a guy to have a look at, and he just said they seem fine. I said, yeah, they seem fine, but they don't work. So I had a lot of problems with that car, and one of which was when I bought it, I filled it with petrol, and I took it back home. And just walked to that door of the house, and I looked back, and it was just a lake of fuel underneath. In filling the tank, the weight of the petrol had pulled the tank off off its mountings. So I thought I'd better phone the fire brigade, because if somebody walks by with a cigarette and just chucks it in the gutter, the car's going to go up in smoke, as will my house. And I tried to explain on the phone that could they just bring some sand and damp it down. Instead, like 2 fire engines arrive with all
lights and sirens.
Going. Every neighbour came out.
They needed something to do, I guess.
Yeah.
I think I gave that Range Rover away because it was such a pain in the arse, and it had so many mystery faults that were pretty life-threatening, one way and another, that I met some guy at a party who was going to live in Portugal, and by the end of the night I said, you can have it. I just don't think he could believe it. But I said, no, you can have it. Just come to the house tomorrow and take it away. I never want to see it again.
Well, Giles, I think you have great stories. We could continue to talk for, a long time. I
hate to bore anybody.
No, not at all. I'm now inviting you back when you have your Jaguar book to talk about the Jaguar book when it comes out.
Yeah, but you won't want to hear about Jags. Sure.
We are Jag adjacent. We really like hearing about Jags, especially now that they're one company and kind of connected. And so your book, Land Rover, Gripping Photos of the 4x4 Pioneer, is available for pre-order. It's due out, I think, in December 1st. And it makes a great gift for any of our Land Rover enthusiast fans. It's available on Amazon here in the US. I think also Barnes & Noble for $35 American. I think in the UK, same places, right?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And if you can buy it from a bookshop, that would be very kind, because everyone in the book world benefits a little bit more than just Amazon there. But I know it's a pain in the neck to have to go to a bookshop, but
you have to find one first.
Authors, we get an extra 10 pence if you do that.
Oh, okay.
It does help, but whatever. If people could continue to buy books, that would be lovely.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, if anyone ever gets the book, I'd love to know any opinions, good or bad. So any feedback of any kind is lovely, because you more so with books than being a reporter, you live in a bit of a vacuum on these things. You spend a lot of time with the material, and then you publish it, and you don't nobody says, and some of the feedback on that you get on, for example, Amazon, a lot of it's very demoralizing, because it gives you a 1-star review and it says book arrived, but the package was damaged.
Right.
The author's work, 1 star because of the shipper, and that kind of thing can put me in a bad mood for days.
And your other books, if folks want to try to track down the book about car toys and
well, they are mostly actually listed online, or you can order them. And I've written about 50 different titles, as I said, so there's a sort of large variety of things. And I've worked on a couple of Dorling Indersley books, sort of more general histories of the car and the classic car as well. So you might find my name in right down in the small print in some of these things as just a humble fetcher of pictures and checker of facts.
Giles, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. Lovely. And thank you very much for having me.
This has been show number 90. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Harold and Morgan and Dixon and Brian for coming on the show again this month. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Dixon, are you still high in the skybox?
Still high in the skybox. Yep.
You're waiting for the border to open up so you can come visit your Land Rovers, right?
More than 6 months separation anxiety.
Yes. Has it set in? Do we need to send in a mental professional?
Just about. Though Ben has been driving it around.
Do you have any Land Rovers on your side of the border?
Me? No.
No.
Ben could ship you your truck, could he not?
No, I actually talked to the customs folks at the borders and asked specifically if a vehicle was towed up just to the border and pushed across and I could pull it the rest of the way. Is that acceptable? And I was told very firmly, no. I have to be professionally shipped.
What if there's like one of those places with a porous border and there just happens to be a hill there and there's no pushing intervention? It just, for some reason, somebody forgets to set the parking brake and it just happens to roll across the border of its own accord. Could you like pick it and take it off get it out of people's way?
That would be nice. Most of the border points now are they're all signed and guarded and everything else.
Yeah, they've got drones up and satellite imagery and all that stuff going on. So yeah, very little does not escape their gaze.
Not the 1970s anymore.
Well, I hope you get reunited with your trucks very soon.
Oh, eventually. I'm patient.
He could do like Radar O'Reilly and mail it to you a piece at a time.
I don't know if our postal services will get all the pieces here.
And thanks to David Short and to Giles Chapman for joining us today on the program, and also to the One True Packs for his continued production support, making us sound better. Visit our website, Centresteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to stories discussed in today's podcast. If you're not a subscriber, please do so you can get the show automatically. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, and now via voicemail. You can directly support the show at patreon.com/Centresteer. You can also buy us a t-shirt, or sticker, and click on store on the menu at the top of our webpage for details. We're part of the 4x4 Radio Network, and I invite you to check out the other 4x4 related shows at 4x4radionetwork.com. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. We're looking at you, John Mayer. You're welcome on the show anytime. John Mayer, want to come on, talk about dirty Land Rovers.
You can leave your shirt on, though. Until
next time, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast.
And you may now resume your important things.
So I needed to shed some dead weight and get the truck moving again.